for folks to get into. Linked into that is the agenda on this first page of the presentation. And the orientation piece should be familiar to pretty much everybody in the room, I think. Basically saying what materials we have available and where they can be accessed. I have paper copies of things if people like those. They're over here. We have in the agenda linked in two Google Docs. One is talking points and the other is noticings and wonderings and questions. Paper version of noticings, wonderings, and questions is available here for people who like to scribble. I'm going to put them like this and ask you guys to pass them down. The idea is that we move fairly quickly through these sections. You can see that the agenda is kind of aggressive. There's a lot to cover. What we really, really want in this room is for people's voices to be heard. I don't think Cheryl has it set up for that. Okay, because we told her that we were just going to record. Okay. We do want to hear from the voices in the room more than we want to hear from me, because I keep showing up and talking for the next 3 months. So we do want to keep it quick, but we also want the opportunity for the board to talk to the people who are the closest to the work, right? So we're going to have sections of presentation followed by a Q&A section. I want you to take some notes either in your minds or on the Google Sheet or on the sheet in front of you so that you have in mind what questions you want to ask when those question and answer periods come up. If there's anything that we don't get to or anything that takes a longer time to answer, and we don't want to take up the time during this meeting, then we'll come back around to it, right? So we still want those noticings, wonderings, questions to be captured so that we can circle back to them as we go through the budget process. Talking points and takeaways is another item that's linked in. And that has some front-loaded material taken from the budget book, some information that we circled around last year that folks found helpful. But I think the important thing there is that that's also a living document, a working document. And so if folks have questions, they can go into those, into the talking points and add information there so we can see that. The budget overview is basically the way that we've laid out both the budget book and the workshop slides. We try to make it so that the budget book is sort of the textbook for the class. And the slide deck is the active version of that. Each one of the sections and each one of the people who are going to speak about their budget tonight will tackle it in 3 pieces. Celebrating successes is us reflecting on the budget investments that we've had in the past and the work that we're currently doing. Facing challenges are problems that have arisen for us and that we're trying to solve, and in many cases trying to solve with budget resources. And then the budget proposal is really highlights of what is in the proposal for those individual departments that are going to be budget drivers in this coming year. What's next? Jeff, you want to talk about this one?
So we've been busy. So this kind of outlines, and this is a similar process that we've run every year, but leadership and Colt Central Office leadership team has really been hard at work, and the whole leadership council over the course starting in December, where we start really building the budget and establishing priorities and focusing everything on the needs of our students. We're now in our 2nd year of basically splitting into 2 professional learning teams across our leadership council. One focused on our DEI efforts across our schools and community, and the other on MTSS, which is the new acronym for a response to intervention RTI, multi-tiered systems of supports, which really looks at how do we best meet the individual needs of all of our students, whether they're whether they're special needs, whether they're general ed, accelerated, struggling, you name it. So that work over the course of the last year and a half has really continues to help frame how we best meet the needs of kids. And so included also in December and then throughout early January is trying to project out what are our sort of, what are our enrollment numbers going to be? What are our salary projections? What are the things that are essentially not fixed costs, but out of our control to try and come up with that number of here's what it's going to cost to keep our personnel and keep our programs moving forward into the next fiscal year. So that rolls into January, where we had all of our staff budget sessions with staff at each of our schools and in each of our departments. It also included, again, as I mentioned, that enrollment analysis and personnel needs assessment, and then really digging into with each principal at each school line by line, what are the things that, where do we anticipate maybe some increases in different line items, whether it's materials or curriculum or facilities related issues, or anything related to the instructional program. And then that got us to February and March, where we started to dig in and review by phase and by department new proposals. And then we start really looking at that K-12 across the whole leadership council, to take a K-12 lens to any new positions that are proposed as part of this budget. And then taking into account our town council finance committee goals, school board finance committee updates. And then I just want to put a plug in for Kate, all the work that she did on the budget book. It's a pretty outstanding document. And I know she's going to say it's everybody, but the work that she does on this is about as good as it gets. That's the overview of where we are.
All right, so the budget presentation, the superintendent's introduction and executive summary in the budget book is the place that we generally try to summarize all of the top talking points of the budget year, the process that we've gone through, the factors that have gone into the budget discussions. So that's a great place for folks to start if they don't want to read all. I think we have like 90 pages this year, so that's cool. I think we should have 150, but I need more pictures of cute children. So if you really just want to get the flavor and the summaries, you can just go through the first 10 pages or so, and you'll be in the executive summary. That's going to call out some of the budget drivers, challenges, and highlights of the budget development process. And underlying all of this work is a really rigorous focus on student needs. We're always going back to student data. We're always talking amongst ourselves as leaders and saying, well, why are you saying that? What is the impact? What are the true stories that you can tell about the kids that are in your care? So the budget presentation is going to be out on the website. We'll have a little link to that later on in the presentation. The next steps, the school board will be doing a first reading on Thursday. Items in motion is a really weird sort of phrase, but it is one of my favorites because between March 21st and the middle of May, when we start to have second readings and budget votes, a lot happens. One of the challenges of bringing a budget book out in the middle of March is that you really don't have the answers to a lot of big questions. One of the biggest is anthem rates. Health insurance rates are a big budget driver for us, and we won't know the top rate till the end of this month and our actual rate until the beginning of April. So that's something that we're not even really trying to do. We're just waiting, right, to find out what that's going to be. We also have Delta dental rates. We have property casualty liability insurance rates. All of those things are being generated right now. And Todd is looking at me wisely because he has quotes, requests for quotes on pretty much everything that we're trying to do in the capital budget to find out what it is gonna really cost. So there are a lot of estimates in your first reading, and those get refined and updated as we get new information. Our finance committee is going to be doing some review. Our first meeting with the budget in our hands is next week, which is pretty cool. Already got some great ideas in terms of some analysis and some charts and some data that we can put together that will help the public better understand what's in here. And then the full town school budget will be presented by the town manager and the superintendent on March 27 it's a special town council meeting. So this is the budget, and we'll, read the spreadsheet and then we'll all go home. What this shows you is the general fund operating budget, the adult education operating budget, and the school nutrition operating budget. Together, those three are the school funds that we lump together under education operating. What this chart shows you is last year's amount that was approved, this year's amount that's proposed in the presentation and the book that you have before you, the dollar change and the percent change. And before we dive into the details, I'll call out two things on this chart. One is non-tax revenues, which is that second from the bottom line, have gone up substantially, which is really lovely because when we get non-tax revenues, that means we reduce our ask for tax revenues, right? The big driver in that is state subsidy, GPA, general purpose aid, which this year as a truly pleasant and joyful surprise went way up. We're typically we are used to seeing it either stay flat or go maybe a little or go down. So that was a lovely boost. And the second thing I'll call out is that our tax request, which is the net budget, sometimes called, the amount that the school department is going to ask the town for in this proposal, in terms of taxes, goes up by 4.68% when you put all three of those operating budgets together, which we are pleased is below the goal of no more than 5% net budget increase that the town council set initially when they were talking about their budget goals. So that's a little bit of a win from the start. And now I think we can go through some of the changes.
Quick question. You're talking about a net budget figure, 4.7%. How do you get there? What's the gross? What's the bigger number?
If you go back to the chart on that page prior, the gross is the third line from the bottom, Dawn, the total education
Okay.
budget.
Okay.
The non-tax revenues, principally subsidy, but a few other things are folded into there. And then the net is after you take out non-tax revenue.
So quick question, and I won't follow this, but why do you take the revenues out? We use the revenues to adjust the front flows to that. It's simply the revenue go at the top and you've got all the offsets from that time. Or do I have that balance sheet or do I can stay wrong?
Well, there's lots of ways to show pluses and minuses. But this is the way that we've typically shown it. We've shown the expenditures and then what we can do to reduce those expenditures in terms of what we ask for from the town.
And one other quick tactical question, I probably GP questions. But how do we get a copy of this? Because I wasn't in my town council, we have to go sign up or sign
It's
in.
in your,
to get
it's in
it.
that book here. I'll go ahead. You good with that? It's in it, yeah, I'll show you. Is that
Thank
good?
you. Thanks for it.
Okay. So this is a slide that's a little bit dear to my heart.
You get to present it. It's your favorite slide.
I'll present this one and then we'll let Jeff talk for a minute. What this says to me is that the leadership team as a whole is super careful in terms of asking for funds from the town. They're super careful in terms of spending. They're actually kind of a cheap bunch, if you really want to know the truth. And they are first looking at their budgets to see where they can reduce before asking for additional costs, asking for additional investments. So what this slide does is it tells the big buckets where the budget between FY24 and FY25 has actually been reduced. There's a reduction for 3 unfilled positions. We have 3 folks who are retiring, and the proposal is not to fill those positions so that we can use them for other purposes. There's a large reduction in debt service. And that's principally just because of some old debt being retired and coming off the books for us, which is nice. We've got a couple of smaller things for operating expenses, vehicle fuel, software subscriptions. And then just going through every single line item, of which there are about 700, and looking for places where we can potentially reduce before we add.
Right, and in terms of some of the new proposals or additions to our level services. The first and foremost is to meet the needs of incoming special education students. So we have an incoming kindergarten class with roughly 20% of the students already on IEPs. And so that's going to require, in order to meet the needs of those students, pretty significant investment. So this is something that Chris is going to be digging into definitely a little bit later on in the presentation. Then we have want to continue to maintain our targeted class sizes for optimum learning. So we have an unusually large class at Wentworth, which will require an additional homeroom. And then this has been actually kind of an unmet need for several years now. And that is a 1.0 FTE librarian position at the K-2, currently shared K-5. And then finally, support inclusivity with adaptive communication strategies. So this is a assistive technology specialist position, which is K-12. That's a half-time position.
That's a position that's currently funded with grant funds, half in local and half in a grant. And so we're proposing to have full-time in the local budget. Then on the next page, we've got a couple more.
So again, with our early learning students and also success with our teacher at Blue Point, we're looking at 2 additional student support teachers, one at 8 Corners and one at Pleasant Hill, for early intervention for our kindergarten students, which is going to be, we feel, particularly challenging cohort of students in terms of their individualized learning needs. And then specialized academic support and learning gaps, special education reading teacher position at Wentworth, a bridge teacher position also at Wentworth, and a 0.3 FTE student support lead teacher at middle school position, making that a full-time position. And then we're also looking to expand opportunities for student enrichment with a chorus teacher at middle school, which will allow us to offer chorus to students with, the school day, not for 6th and 7th graders, just after school. And then also looking to develop an esports team, which is actually would join roughly between 30 and 40 high schools across Maine that are already competing.
So the total investment, when we talk about investment, we're talking about, as Jeff said, level services is closing the doors in June, coming back in September, providing the same services, the same programs, obviously knowing that kids are changing and moving between grades and so forth, coming in and out. But level services is the status quo. And then the investments are over and above that. And so what we're looking at in terms of new investment, we have what we call a required new investment, which is special education services, again, students who are already identified as needing services. We have a total new investment that's about 1.9% of the overall budget proposal. We have a net new investment, which means after we take out the $336,000 of personnel reductions, of about 1.3%, $886,000. 1.3% of the proposed FY25 operating budget. That means that amount going to something that we don't have today. right? Or something that's grant funded that's not in our budget. So it's a pretty small amount for change, for improvement, for growth, for meeting goals and, trying to address some of the challenges in the district, but they're very important investments. Right now, the people that you really want to hear from, we've got our department reports, and I think first up is going to be Todd.
Thank you.
Todd's like, yeah, sure.
We clean things and we fix things. Thank you, that's all.
No problem.
So thank you to Kate for, again, building these pages that make us all look so professional. But we start off thinking about the successes of the investments we've made in the past for facilities. Some of these are capital investments. Some of them are regular day-to-day operational expenses, but the ones I've put here are largely capital investments. And it runs the gamut. I don't need to read every one of those because you can read, but it runs the gamut of flooring, HVAC items, particularly at the middle school, but also at the high school auditorium, lighting upgrades, which help us reduce our electrical use, which is ever more critical this year as electrical costs are going up across the country. And then we added a part-time facility scheduler because we took it over from community services and we never really filled that position. We just kind of jammed it in and squeezed it in on the existing staff that we have. And that didn't work well. So now we have a 20-hour-a-week person who really deals with the public on all the requests they have to use our buildings that largely never rest. These are community buildings on the off-school hours, and they function pretty much all day on the weekends, into the evenings, after school, and they're very busy places. So the next slide, please, Kate. Again, I made reference to the fact that we have a 30% increase starting in the end of December with supply rates, which is we buy our electricity in two pieces. We buy the actual electricity from a plant that makes it, and then we pay Central Maine Power to deliver it. So the increase is in the actual people burning, typically burning something to make it, or using a renewable resource like solar, wind, and hydro. Our pricing for our materials that it takes to keep these schools operating continues to stay pretty high, and in some cases continue to go up. So I'm talking about everything from custodial supplies to mechanical supplies and equipment, to just keep everything going. Long lead times continue as well. I ordered the boilers for 8 Corners 2 years ago and I still don't have them. Thanks to the shutdown of manufacturing for cast iron. And then the deferred maintenance, I really was holding off to determine the decision about our school project. I was waiting on a few decisions because I would have gone about them differently if I knew we were building a new school. I would have tried to be very, very frugal and kept the schools going without making major investments if we were just going to decommission them as schools. That isn't happening yet that we know of, and really the time is due. And I'm working with the new building committee actually right after this meeting to give them a tour of a couple of schools. And finding quality contractors has been not because they aren't available, it's because we have such narrow windows in which to do the work. We have to squeeze them in, coupled with the timing of our budget doesn't really work for facilities, because by the time the budget is approved, all those contractors are already booked for work this coming summer. So that's an added challenge. Next slide. So we we're not asking for a lot of extras in this budget for facilities other than to account for the increases that I just explained. We'll continue to piece away at changing out electrical fixtures and trying to save energy wherever we can. We're doing that in classrooms at the middle school right now. And it'll help us to keep pace with the rising cost of supplies, utilities, equipment, and to hire qualified staff, particularly to clean our schools. We've had a real challenge in being fully staffed on the custodial ranks. This is just a quick overview of our capital budget. I'll refer to the items on the right-hand side under facilities, but we have categories in our capital budget. So long-range planning would include things like using an architect or engineering firm to help us plan for larger projects. Security and access management includes things like the cameras and the door controls and even backup generator power. Roofing, flooring, plumbing, building envelope is the skin of the building. You've heard me say that probably every year, which is the walls, windows, roof, doors, siding, etc. HVAC and electrical are probably our two biggest consumers of finance. And grounds and site maintenance and furnishings and equipment replacement are all items on that list.
And the other pieces of the capital budget are transportation, where we have buses on the schedule to be replaced. Every 10 years, we try to move a bus out and bring a bus in. And we have 30 buses, so it works out really nicely.
And the thing with hiring custodians, for example, you'll see in the budget book, there's a picture of a 31-year veteran custodian that retired last summer. And we have been able to hire a couple of people, but they come in with virtually zero experience. So then we have the steep uphill climb of getting them trained up to speed, knowing how to do things, and then we get them into the summer, and that's a whole new thing for them because of finishing floors and so forth. So it's a real challenge to, it costs a lot of money to bring on an employee. So losing veteran employees, and we lost 3 or 4 to retirement or moving out of the area last year, which really hit us hard. And I will pay tribute, which I did in my budget book also. The custodial crew that remains has done a heck of a good job because they've been working shorthanded really since COVID. And they've just taken on more and more, and they keep doing it. And I gave a tour last Friday to a school from Wyndham Raymond, and we toured this school, the middle school. And they walked through this building and said, "How old is this building?" And I said, 10 years old. And they didn't say this to me, but they said it to Diane after. They couldn't believe it was 10 years old because it still looks really new. And I said, that's a testament to the people that do the work every night in this building. So, anyway.
Sure. So the other thing that's on this slide is the tech budget, but Jen's got her own section, so we'll.
You would wait.
That.
Yeah.
I think that's probably just as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
That's tough. Let's see what happens next. Is there another slide?
Yeah, this is adult education now.
Oh, wow, look at that.
It's my turn.
You know what we didn't do? We didn't introduce her.
Oh, we should do introductions.
I'm talking up to, so.
Sarah Redmond, Transportation Director.
General Ryan, School Board.
Julie, can you have school board? Mary Ann Doyle, adult education.
Nicole Benham, Assistant Director of Special Services.
Chris Brody, Director of Special Services.
Jeff Burrow, Superintendent.
Leanne Casalona, school board.
Katie Beecher, Director of Curriculum and Assessment.
Diane Netto, assistant superintendent.
Kate Bolton, budget book manipulator. And Carolyn, before you came in, we said we're gonna do little segments and then we'll have a Q&A. And I could feel your question rising, and that's okay. That's okay. But we do have segments with the Q&A tucked in the middle there, so if you can.
Oh, yeah, good. Carolyn Gannon, School Board. Jen Day, IT Director. Frayla Tarpinian, School Board. Shannon Lynch, School Board.
That's great. Boy, I got this so organized.
Great intentions, right? That's what counts.
It'll all come around in the end, right? All right, I think that means it's time for Mary Ann, who has introduced herself.
So small part-time program, I came aboard in July, just after we all shut down in March and I was here in July. So we had the challenge particularly with our English language learners, without being able to bring them into the building, because it's really hard to learn English wearing a face mask. We did a lot of that, you know, stepping up to do Zoom classes. We did some in-person classes that were off-site. And lo and behold, we just kind of held our own, not really knowing what prior numbers looked like before COVID. And now we're at this point of, I think this year was the big surprise that, you know, I have an enrichment coordinator who came along the same time. She came on board in October of the year that I got here. And so we held our own with enrichment courses, and this year we're at that point of having, suddenly we're having 855 or something in that range for enrichment. But the biggest piece that happened was suddenly our English language learning classes. We were used to teaching 8 or 12 people and having this real small environment where you could kind of watch the learning happen. Just suddenly in our beginner classes in the fall, we had 20 people, 22 people enrolled. We had no idea that was coming. I had no idea that that many people had found permanent housing, because we had gone off and taught, we piloted some teaching in one of our hotels when we had an Afghani population that came 2 years ago. And then we didn't seem to have a lot of hotel population. So these folks have all found housing. And suddenly we have this influx. And frankly, in a beginner class, that was just way too much to ask our instructors to suddenly. So we ended up on our Monday night beginner class, breaking it in two. And the person that works for us part-time, who we've taken on as an MLL academic coordinator, stepped in and taught that other beginner class on Monday nights, to just try to manage the fact that we had these classes that had 22 and 24 people in them that had reached capacity. So she broke that out, and it wasn't long before we suddenly still had 20 people. We managed the wait list that we had in October. It was 4 people in October. 2 of those folks in October were, you know, kids under 20 in our population, that one of them had been in a refugee camp and had gone as far as what we would call 5th grade. And so our challenge so again, I think we're talking about success, but we just have this exploding population. Fortunately, we had funding through a COVID grant and ARPA funding that enabled us to bring aboard somebody to help me as a part-timer, to say, each one of these times that we bring somebody in and we have to do a reading assessment and an intake, if you can't speak English, we have to sort of do that on one-on-one. So we're doing that intake mostly one-on-one. Oftentimes, each person that has that appointment is bringing another 2 in, and then the assessment takes an hour and a half to do the reading assessment. So it's a lot of manpower up front to just figure out, well, how are we placing them? We have now 2 beginner classes. We have a daytime Wednesday class that's at the library. That's, you know, easy to enroll because it's pretty multi-level. That got so big that Yvonne, who's that MLL academic coordinator, who also teaches, you know, ended up with recruiting some volunteers and having some volunteers sit in every Wednesday at the library. And then the daytime need grew so big that we went out and got asked again for space in the community. And it ended up that we could have space on Mondays at St. Nicholas Church, so we just started that in January. We still have a Wednesday night MLL class that goes on at Southgate. It has surrounding folks that come in from Payne Road and just the community there. Sometimes they walk over there. Sometimes they drive. So we've got that one going on. And then we have an intermediate level class on Tuesdays that, again, I have to say, everything was capping out at 16 and 20 and 22. With wait lists, and the wait lists seem to just be continuing. So, you know, our biggest story is that thankfully, we had this ARPA funding, which gave us Yvonne 4 to 8 hours a week to just assist with, that was just a coordination piece, to just take folks in and help me with the flow of how we're doing intake and assessment. So this year, with that funding ending and looking at our numbers of learners, we're requesting local funding to just support having Yvonne 4 to 8 hours a week to assist with that. The other really big piece in our program is post-pandemic. We see people come through our academics where they have to take the 5 subject competency test. And what we're working with now, and we have been, is we're still getting that population of kids that stopped out in 9th grade. They came back, they reattempt, and then they finally come to the pathway through adult ed. And a lot of times they only have like 9 credits. So they don't even, when I met with Katie and with Nate in, you know, late fall and said, how do we sort of manage this piece? The emergency COVID diploma in many cases just hasn't worked as an option, as a pathway. So they're working we're all working really hard because a lot of times the content isn't there. If they've only had 7 or 9 credits in high school, there's not a lot of recall on your higher level math, or maybe they never had math to be able to pass the high set test. So we spend a lot of time with our academics and our MLL population, just juggling, weaving the threads, trying to make sure that no one is lost in that process. So we're asking for that money to replace the ARPA funds to have that coordinator. And then we don't know, maybe Diane has a better picture of when that sort of pandemic era stops for those kids that, particularly the ones that were freshmen that got stopped in March. It didn't work for them. That part-time school the next year didn't work for them. And then, we're dealing with just the structural pieces that they need to have to be able to walk away and then go on to college and go on to careers in life. So we juggle a lot of those kids. They're still kids. They're 18 and 19 and 20.
And yet I would say, like, to your credit, to see the students who have graduated, right? Like, we hosted an in-person adult education graduation in June, and it was really goosebump worthy, right? Because every single graduate has their own pathway and their own story about what brought them, full circle to getting that credential. And so that is a real strength of our program. The other thing that I would mention about, the request for the locally funded MLL coordinator is a lot of the adults, that Mary Ann and her staff are working with are also parents to our K-12 students. And so certainly it would be to all of our benefit to make sure that the adults in our community have the capacity to learn and understand English so that they can better support the students in our schools. because there are a lot of resources being expended to, you know, trying to better communicate with them.
And another place where Adult Ed has really been a super cool partner is in finding folks for our workforce. We've had-
gonna
Yes.
say that. I was gonna say, one of your successes was coming to me about one of your students.
Yep.
And, she's a great employee.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's helped the program and you helped her. She's got a full-time job now, works in the school, helped me out. So I appreciate that thing.
And her little guy's only in second grade, so,
Right.
so again, it's, yes, I would say that we've mentored
Mhm.
folks through the process of applying, when their skills come up enough. So an example of one of the gals we're working with, the under 20 years old, 18 years old. And I've often said to Diane in meetings, I don't know if it's her mom in her 30s or she that is the one with the little tiny baby. There's somebody in the family that has this little child. She came with only a dialect and she came from, not having a lot of formal education. And just 2 Mondays ago, she was in our program. And Yvonne was teaching that beginner Monday class. And this gal was translating what Yvonne was saying in Lingala to another student. She could not read, we could not test her when she was put on the wait list in October
Mhm.
in something that would give us a reading score. So we were using pictorial material to see if we could get there. And so I just thought that that was such a remarkable progress, those little moments when, you know, you see those successes. We had another gal who's a grandmother and has kids in the school system who came to us speaking Farsi. So obviously we couldn't give her a reading test. And then we got her to the point of being able to give her a conversational English test. And now she's advanced to the point that this past summer, she had a job in a laundry. And now she just got hired as a housekeeper. And she negotiated getting Mondays and Wednesdays off to continue in class with us. So, you know, when we're able to just really get in and do a deep dive with no resources.
Right. Right.
You get the big win.
You know, we're looking at like, oh, we have 4 books up here on the shelf that we, you know, oh, we have to order more books, you know.
But that speaks to your commitment and the commitment of your
Right.
staff, right? And I think that's a through line that you're gonna hear all evening.
So maybe we go to Peter.
I have nothing to say. So this year again, thanks to the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Education, lunch and breakfast are free again. So that's a great thing. Releases the stigma of anybody, you know, filling an application or anything like that. Also great that we're serving 25 to, you know, 20 to 25,000 breakfasts and 40,000 lunches a month. That's in like a 20-day month, but some months are longer. So, that's a lot. And the next item on there is the freezer chart I worked on. We got it all installed in. We didn't have that. We would not have a place to house all the food. We could not go 2 or 3 days without having that product in there because we're doing so much over the course of the whole district. So, you know, thanks to him and his group. We also been, it only took us a year extra to get it because it was
Right.
back order, but he rented me one. So we're also part of the USDA supply chain assistance, which we've gotten several rounds of payments, I believe. And I mean, there's not a figure on there, but I know that one of them was at least $70,000. So basically, you know, where we've had an issue with certain supply and demand, like everything, certain things, they'll give us money back. which also we get, there's a local seed to farm, grant that we apply for, which we use Maine food, we get $1 back for every 3 we spend, so, you know, it helps the Maine farmers and all that, and we had already been dealing with them before, so it was kind of a no-brainer. So we're still doing that, so we're out there receiving every grant that we possibly can get. Not on there, was we did get a $10,000 grant that we used for summer feeding, where we went, we actually took the van, our van, you'll see that we have a new one, but our van, we took out to several locations and delivered lunches in key areas that we knew that there was a need for it. Maybe students with backpack, you know, our backpack program and all that, so we made sure that they were taken care of all week during the summer as well. Some of the challenges, staffing. I feel like I'm in heaven right now. I just hired a few people, and today was the first day that I actually could go to my schools and not have to worry about being back. So that was good. And we've got maybe possibly one more person come on to kind of really give us some extra time. So, but it's been a challenge for that ever since COVID, because we lost people, and then people retired, and people just didn't want to work anymore. So we had a hard time. One of the other challenges that we're facing is we're doing so much for lunches that we have no space to even house this food. Like we were talking about the small schools, it's like, I'm gonna have Todd put a storage unit out somewhere, because I have no place to put any food. It's like, we can't even put more than like a day's worth of food into it, because there's no storage area. We have freezers and like back rooms and all that to house some of the stuff. But we're having a hard time with it. And it just wasn't set up for that much production. So
2/3 of enrolled students every day.
Right.
And then breakfast is over a third.
Yeah.
That's great.
So the other thing is this year, the removal of the expanded food stamp benefits, and also the influx of families that have come into the district has really stretched our backpack program too. We've doubled the amount of backpacks. You know, pre-pandemic, it might have been 25 or so. Now it's like over 60, close to 70. So that's a whole other issue. And one of the reasons why we needed a bigger truck, because we deliver a lot of these for people that don't drive. Sarah loans me some of her people, and they go out on Wednesdays and deliver these backpacks to these families that are in need. So that's, thank you.
I think we're gonna have to change the name from backpack though,
Yeah.
because back in the olden days, we literally packed
It's not that
the
anymore.
PB&J. You should see these huge
It's a-
boxes that go out.
Can you like give an example of if you're providing that to a family, what that might look like?
Say for instance, it might be, so during the regular school year, we do it for Saturday and Sunday, so they get a breakfast and a lunch. So it may be that they get some pancake syrup, juice, depending on how many's in the family, a carton of juice, a gallon of milk, and then they'll get, say it might have been, a hot meal that, you know, depends on where they are too. They may be in a hotel, so we make pre-made meals in microwave safe containers and also send those out to those people. But for other people that have the capability to cook, we might send out hamburgers and hot dogs and rolls, or whole chickens or pork chops or any of that stuff, sandwich meat, cheese, just everything. I mean, eggs, so they can make their own.
And you're providing that for the whole family, not just for the school age student?
Yeah, and in the summertime, we do it for the whole week and weekend, make sure that those families are fed.
Vacation weeks.
And vacation weeks, we do that, and then every holiday, we do a whole holiday meal for them. What's that? Hello Fresh. It's like Hello Fresh. So our proposal, is, you know, obviously just we needed to provide nutritious meals at no cost, fund all the positions I can, and eliminate reliance on local tax dollars of our program.
Peter gets to be the hero of the game because
So basically, this
there's no
is
tax request.
third
for
year.
nutrition.
This is
Yeah.
the third year that we have not required any money from the town. And if you go to, I think the next slide has my van on it.
Oh, do we have the other name? It's in the
Our
book.
van.
It's in the book. It's in the book. I don't
Yeah,
think
it's in the
it's-
book. Well, in the book, you see, you know, some of the stuff.
Plug it.
We were kind of baffled. We got an email from the state, and hopefully they're not watching. The email came out that, we're only allowed to have 3 months operating budget
Surplus.
and surplus, and, you know, so basically they made us spend money that we would have liked to have saved. Kate sends an email, it's like, program's finally making money and they're making us spend it, so we bought our van. And I didn't design it like Sarah wanted, but also
It's
on this,
beautiful.
just a few other things. I mean, if you look in the book, every single class in the school work with Kate Hewitt with the greenhouse, and usually in the fall, what we did this fall is any of the crops that came in, we had classes coming in processing, we made salsa, we made roasted vegetables, all that. She had some other stuff here and there, squash that we would cut up, but then after all that stuff ran out, I still had every single class in Wentworth come into the kitchen and they learned how to cook. They did pizza, you can see the kids cutting up vegetables and all that, they learned knife skills, making all that stuff. And I also, teach a culinary at the high school. I have a high school student now. They actually come down here because it's, more conducive to, with the equipment and stuff. And actually, he runs basically the teacher coffee shop up there. They do baking and all that stuff, but also incorporates practical math and all that. So, that's another success. Done.
Let's see. Guess what? It's question time.
Can I ask a favor?
You may.
Just because Todd, is on his schedule, can we ask Todd questions first? And then back into
That is
Mary Ann and to Peter.
That is a great idea.
I have that.
Sure.
When you were mentioning that about ordering stuff and it's on back order, do the prices that you bought at stay consistent or? I
Good
wasn't sure.
question.
Had
Yeah,
to
they're,
accelerate.
you know, the contractors that we use to buy, you know, a boiler, for example, you know, they get a price from the supplier at the time. And sometimes the supplier doesn't know if it'll actually be 6 months or a year or whatever. So they give me a quote, we issue a purchase order, and they know that price. So the ones that are coming in from 8 Corners are gonna be, we're probably gonna get them for about $50,000 less than they're currently sold for. So
That's good for us.
there's a benefit to waiting, but we need them. So,
On that same vein, if you were to contract with somebody to say, all right, we need to do the roof on this building, but you can't start until June. Are they holding that same price for their labor as well?
yes. Yeah, it's an agreed upon price regardless of the timing. Unless it's next year, then they might put a whole year add-on of whatever percentage for their labor it is.
Thank you.
So my question was, first I was looking at the wrong column. So, but when I got to the right column, can you tell us what page you're on? Oh, sorry, I am on page 73. So just looking at your capital projects, the security and access management, we dabbled into this area a little bit in our last finance committee meeting. And was just curious if there's anything that what you have in that number, if there's anything with adding some extra security measures to some of the K-2 schools.
I think it would be good for me to point out that at the very last pages of the budget book in the appendix, there's a more detailed version of the capital budget with the individual projects in it. Those pages that are in the budget book it's like a little narrative that is laid out like the town's capital projects, so we have kind of used their format. But you'll see the individual projects that make up the total in there, all the bits and pieces
There it
at the
is.
back of the book there.
There you go.
I think, I'm talking over Todd, but we did put some funding in long-range planning to talk about what the engineering would look like for secure access, secure entries, vestibules at Pleasant Hill and Eight Corners.
Yep.
But the actual money to construct something, we don't really know what that should be yet,
Yeah.
right? So there's a placeholder in FY26.
Well,
For
and the main reason we didn't put vestibules, and I've been at this recently, so I feel like a broken record saying it, but there was a fundamental reason we didn't add, we couldn't quickly in 6 weeks of the summer, put secure vestibules at Pleasant Hill or Eight Corners for very specific reasons. And rather than bore you with the tale, suffice it to say is it's not just what we did at Blue Point by adding a second set of doors. That's not physically possible there for a variety of reasons I won't bore you with. But if you'd like to know more, I'd be happy to lull you to sleep sometime with the details. But it involves structure and the layout of the actual two buildings.
Okay, you read my mind, so that answered question number 2. Thank you.
There's a lot in that book. That detailed worksheet that's at the very back there, that's really Todd's and my working papers. So that we sit together and we go through each of the projects and then we distill it down into this little, paragraph. So it takes a lot of distilling to get to the 2 or 3 pages that are in the main part of the budget book.
And to Kate's earlier point of sometimes the numbers that we put in there are our best guess because we don't have enough information back yet to get a physical quote for something like that. So,
And so in the current year proposal, you'll see refinements between first reading and second reading. Another elephant in the room in terms of capital budget this year is exactly what Todd was talking about, was deferral of work at K2 schools and even at the middle school, where we're putting money into the budget saying, oh gosh, I guess we need to deal with this now. But we may have better information as we go into second reading. If there's some indication from the building committee of what direction they're going in, then we can lean on that a little bit to maybe make some different decisions, but we can't just not acknowledge that the need is there.
Yeah, so when you are looking at things for the K-2 school, to the work that we have neglected, or not neglected, that's the wrong one, put aside while we were waiting for a decision to defer.
Yeah.
Thank you. How much of that work is, if the building steering committee decides that their recommendation is to move forward with a consolidated school, how much of that expenditure is salvageable from the back end? So if the decision is to consolidate and the town decides to use those buildings for another purpose, to repurpose them, how much of that expenditure is unsalvageable? You put in a vestibule, what is the placeholder that you put into that?
I actually didn't put a placeholder for the actual vestibule. I just put in a placeholder for the planning, design and engineering of those vestibules.
And how much would that be?
It was 80, I just, again,
Yeah, just
best
a guess.
guess, $85,000 for working with a designer and engineer for 2 vestibules. And again, it was my best guess. I'm still waiting for a quote back from actually a design firm.
I think it's an interesting dance. If I didn't live here, it would be really interesting. But the difference between deferring unnecessary or deferring necessary repairs because you don't know what the outcome is going to be, and then just deciding, okay, we're at that moment where something is going to be damaged, something is going to be ruined in those buildings, and they're still town property and they've still got kids in them, and for the next 5 years they've got to stay up and they've got to not leak and they've got to be safe. And so that's that balance, right? You don't want to throw good money after bad, but you also don't want to just say abandon ship.
Right.
Right.
As an example of that, it's a really good point you made. And if you go to the K2 schools, they have cedar shingle siding. It's been there since 1992. So it's now 30+ years old. And that's about a 30-year product. And not every section, we don't have to do a whole scale re-siding, but there are sections that I've been keeping my eye on and having my maintenance people go and kind of patch it together and keep them watertight and safe and so forth. that now we're just gonna have to replace a whole section because they're all cupped and rotted and dried and they won't hold stain or paint anymore. So we just, part of my request this year is to have that done because it would be irresponsible to let it go farther because it would start getting inside. So
Right.
we've been lucky that my guys have been able to keep it the way it has been for the past few years, but
Yeah.
it's time now to.
And,
Take it on
and
a
then
bigger
part of
project.
that same sort of dance around what's appropriate was to say, okay, well, we really need to do all three. But let's not put all three in this year's budget because Lord knows, what's gonna happen next with those buildings. So we'll start with the worst one. And then we'll put the next one in the next year and, again, we've got a responsibility to these investments of the towns. They still belong to the town. We don't want them to deteriorate or become damaged.
And, the most important part of the building envelope at those schools is the roofs. And we have kept the roofs bulletproof. In fact, Acorn's got almost an entirely brand new roof last summer. So, and that was the building that I was thinking that if the referendum had passed, probably the school may have kept Eight Corners to repurpose for perhaps a pre-K facility or something like that because it's so close to campus. So I really have been kind of paying more attention to Eight Corners than the other two for that reason. And now all three.
And even if you decommissioned those buildings and sold them, it would be a lot more lucrative to sell a building that isn't leaking and falling down than it would be to sell a derelict.
And, go ahead, I'll let you ask.
No, I have a different question, so you can.
The other piece is that for our mechanical systems, we participate in a pretty extensive preventive maintenance program. So, for example, the boilers that frankly should have been replaced at 30 years. One of the ones at Eight Corners is leaking. We have a crew that keeps them running and operable. And even though they're compromised, they still work and produce heat and they're not falling apart or blowing up or anything like that because we've taken care of them for 30 years. So that's an investment that pays itself off.
All right.
My next question is really kind of for both, because we are negotiating 3 contracts this year, which is custodians and food service are two of the 3. Since and actually, my question would actually be for all 3 of you. I'm curious as to what you have to pay because you are all short-staffed. What do you have to pay in the way of overtime to get work done?
I have one staff member that pretty much had worked overtime, so it was probably at least 10 hours a week. And then, like I said, pretty much I never left the kitchen here all day long. I mostly did my work at home, because I had to be out on the floor, so other than that, I didn't have substitutes. It's just, everybody worked really hard and, by the time their shift was done, it's either I stayed or, one of my other staff members that were doing, like, that does the backpack program. She might be doing something with that, so she'd stay and finish up, but yeah.
I'll defer to Kate on the overtime on mine. I don't think we've paid, a lot more in overtime for our staff existing, but we have taken on 4 third-party contract cleaners, which cost more per hour, but we don't pay them benefits and we don't pay them for holidays and we don't pay them for sick time. So, all in all, I would say it was probably a bit of an increase, but not egregiously so, because our other custodians, to Peter's point, have just picked up more. And when there's a person out in this building, everybody that's here just picks up a piece of his or her area. And, one person does the trash, one person does the floors, one person does the bathroom. They all just split it up and just take on the extra load without working extra.
Or Tony does.
Or Dan or I can manage the rest of it.
Mhm.
And when I do it, it doesn't cost the school anything. When Dan does it, it costs a little bit because he is an hourly employee, so. Doesn't cost anything like lost dinner time, which I could use.
And for us, we're so short-staffed, a lot of our athletics, actually, I just sent an email out today for Darragh Bus Lines to help us out. Custom Coach went under, so they're not an option anymore. Yes. And not to say anything bad about companies, they were so short-staffed, they would guarantee us buses and then not show up. So that was an issue. We did come across Derigo. I called the owner of that company, and they're a small company, 4 buses, 4 staff. But they're trying to cover some weeks, 10 or 12 buses a week in the afternoons. Sometimes they have to do drop-offs and we send other staff back to do pickups. But our staff, myself including, is aging. And sometimes they're just exhausted at the end of the day that they don't want overtime. I mean, they're picking up a lot of things during the day to manage. At one point last year, Mike and I had talked, and I would assume Diane was involved in this conversation where it could come to parents transport their kids to an activity if we didn't have a bus, but it never happened. Like, we made it so that it didn't happen, whether it be try to combine a couple of bus runs and send a regular driver somewhere. We drive the bus run. Some of our spares are, they're snowbirds and they're only here for a short time and then they're gone for a few months and then they might come back for a couple months. But to keep everything going, we have contracted and we just see what happens at the end of the day.
I would say to Sarah's point, most of our staff, there are some staff members who want overtime, but there's so few now. I think that's another sort of
Right.
labor market issue that's going on, is you don't have people that are lining up to work extra hours. They're done, they're working hard, and then they're going home.
Yeah, my wonder, the reason I'm asking is because I think of, other districts and competing pay and keeping good staff, hiring them first and then retaining them. So when we talk about increases to do so, right, we're talking about increasing pay to do so. And so what I'm getting at is, I wonder what the comparison is between hiring somebody new at a higher pay than what we've previously paid versus paying overtime versus paying a contracted service versus paying for a private bus company to transport our kids. We're better off just paying a little bit more in the way of salary
Yes.
versus paying for these
Yes,
contracted services.
Absolutely, because we lost several hires because of the salary here. And there's nothing that we can do about it. It's a burning contract, so unfortunately, we're stuck to that number. And we are behind the 8 ball in our salaries in surrounding areas.
The other thing in the custodial ranks is the large majority of the custodial staff works in the evening shift. Most of the time, businesses pay a premium for working second shift or third shift. And so a custodian applicant could go to Amato's and work days for $19 an hour and come here and work 20, but at night, forget it. The decision all day is to go make sandwiches during the day.
Well, even
Go
that
home at night, you know,
store on Broad Turn and Route 1, it was starting off at $21 an hour.
Right.
To work in the store.
Right. So,
Just as an aside to policy, you might want to put down to take a look at the busing, policy that we have when it comes to the students, because right now the district is supposed to be supporting it, so we need to make sure we adjust for parents to take kids back and forth to events.
Or they forfeited.
Or they forfeit.
Or they would have
Yeah.
forfeited.
And
And
I
we have
I think-
rearranged athletic schedules. Unfortunately, if it's a JV varsity team going, JV always plays first. So sometimes that is canceled or rescheduled at a later date so that the varsity teams can go out. Or it's come down, I know, do we send the middle school team or do we send the varsity team? And can we reschedule or can we not reschedule? It's tough. I can't say that's not. Everything has gone out. We're very fortunate with the staff that we have. But it's hard.
And Sarah, I'm 100% behind you on this.
Oh, I
I think it's
know.
the best thing that we could do, because most of the time, parents are there anyways, so
Right.
bring them along. It was just more to make sure that we had covered ourselves as a
Oh,
board,
absolutely.
that our policies were in sync with what was
Right,
possibly requirement.
right. Unfortunately, Scarborough, and I can say this during my presentation, but unfortunately, with Scarborough, I don't live in Scarborough. We do a lot for our kiddos here. I'm glad to see. My kids played athletics in other departments. And there were no buses to practices or across the town for different ball fields. So we are very fortunate that we can get everything done. Off of what we do.
I'm gonna take a break for just a moment because Todd needs to be at his next engagement. And we do have food, I believe, out already. So if, Todd, do you need to be fed before you?
Do you wanna take it to go?
I will survive. I got plenty of extra on board.
Yeah, but you know, your blood sugar might get weird.
I'll be fine. If I see something interesting, I might graze as I go by.
If there are any additional questions around facilities, I know it's a huge topic. Let's just capture them and make sure that we get them answered as we go through the next few weeks. Todd loves answering questions. It's his favorite thing. Which is why he's going to the next place to go answer some questions.
Dorian, do you take any other questions from the gallery here? Or you just?
If you would write it down, we'll get back, I'll make sure we'll get them.
Only if it's a yes or no question.
Well, I'll take a look on the break.
So.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Mary Ann or Peter, or do we want to take?
Oh, I took all
Yeah,
sorts of
got
stuff down.
questions.
For Peter,
Yes.
is there some place that the community can go in order to make donations for the backpack program?
Yes, yes, there is on our RevTrak store. There is a backpack program donation. There's a school nutrition program donation button, and you can pay online or you can write us a check.
Any chance that we could maybe put something right on the district page? Because I'm sure a lot of folks wouldn't know
Yeah.
how to find RevTrak.
A button.
You know how I like buttons.
Sorry.
You can only have so many buttons now, Freela.
We need a bag shaped button.
A bus shape
We need a backpack shaped button.
We do,
A food,
as a product.
like a
Yeah.
burger shaped button.
But what you're doing is incredible, and I think that we need to make sure that folks can find a good way in order to donate to us.
And we've accepted donations on behalf of it, so there's organizations that are set up for that, but I think you're right, I think the district being more upfront with that program likely get a lot of support. I
Oh,
absolutely agree.
Yeah, we put a big blurb out during COVID and we got a ton of support, but I think folks might think that things kind of calmed down, and I think they're more.
Yeah.
That's a good suggestion. I'll
That's a
I'll
great
work on
idea.
that.
Backpack button.
A backpack shape.
Is there any questions for Peter?
Not for Peter.
I have one for Peter. Going back to my same line of thought with employees, when you think of the process you have to use to feed the K through 2 schools,
Mhm.
it was honestly, when we started the school building process, something I learned, which was the cafeterias in the schools are too small
Mhm.
to feed the students there. So can you just really quickly explain the process, what you do to feed the students there?
Do you mean to prepare the food?
Yeah, huh?
Do you mean to prepare the
Like,
food?
where do you, what is the process? Where do you make the food? How do you get it
Basically,
there?
because one of the things that we had that grant, the supply chain assistance, if we do no processed food, like, you know, flour, raw meats, vegetables, all that stuff, we get money back. So our theory is here and has always been from scratch.
Mhm.
So we get money for that. So it's prepared here, sauces, stews, soups, all that.
That went work.
At what?
Yes,
Here, it went.
not in the library, yeah. Yeah, so we prepare all that stuff here and then it's transported to the K2 schools by, with our.
With our new
van.
Various people. If it's something where they're having a chicken sandwich or something like that, they have like one oven that they can cook that in and prepare that at the school. But there's not enough room to store that stuff at the schools. So we have a hard time with that. So sometime at Wentworth, we end up, you know, so you figure if we're doing, you know, 1,000 a day. I mean, like at this school, we do well over 500 lunches a day, plus the K2s, it's another 375 that we're sending out all at once. So it's all being cooked here. So
And it's going in the truck
And this-
every day.
Every single
in
day.
Every day.
this, I mean, it's a great facility, but it's undersized even for that. We don't have enough stock space. I had stole, one of Todd's, storage rooms because it has my backpack, pantry stuff, plus it has a bunch of dry goods. Because the stock rooms that were built couldn't even last 3 days of food for us.
So in other words, the cafeterias at the K through two schools that are unable to support the schools are really infringing on Wentworth's ability to
Yes,
appropriately feed the students here.
politely, I said.
And Wentworth's cafeteria wasn't built with free lunch and breakfast in mind for all students, and
Pre-COVID,
so.
We're probably doing 300 or so,
Yeah.
maybe on a good day, so, obviously, it was a lot easier to manage that. Now, it's not only that we're sending all the stuff out to the other schools, but we're also increasing everywhere, so it's, it's difficult. We get several orders a week, we only can get a couple of like grocery orders twice a week, but we used to get it for a week or more. Now it's lasting 2 or 3 days. We have just enough place to house it. You see stuff in the hallways out here, because I have nowhere to put stuff.
So after preparing the food for just the day, how many trips out are you guys doing?
One.
Just one?
One long one.
But that's something else, to your point about the bus drivers and their time that they could be using doing something different. That's gas we don't need to be paying, that's
Electric. now,
electric.
so.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I guess electricity we don't have to pay for.
And I will tell you what
We'll
they.
plug in a solar.
Yeah.
And to his credit, the backpack, I mean, you think of a little kid with a backpack on, these guys are taking the backpack program. They're boxes, they're not this little bag, especially for the weeks that they do it or the long weekends or the holidays. They're boxes, it could be 2 or 3 boxes per family, depending on how many family members are in those families. And they take them right to the houses. So that nobody knows, there's no. So, yeah.
Well, that's good information to pass on to the building steering committee.
Yes, I can't reiterate how small facilities are for what we're doing now.
Right, so questions for Mary Ann?
I'm so sorry. But you had mentioned a couple of the community spaces that we're going into for the classes. Do we have to pay for those facilities or are they?
So when we first looked, before we got the, space at the library a year ago, so the space at the library is in the town. So we just have, that's for free. We are paying at the church. So, it's $50 for a day when we go in there. So it does add up.
And Southgate gives us their meeting place in
Yes.
their facilities. So the first place that we've paid for recently is St. Nicholas.
I was curious if during the day if the hub was an option or are they unable to take, is it not centrally located enough?
Yes,
You mean community services?
Yeah, community services.
that's kind of a hike for folks. They're out almost to where the malls are. We don't have students, we have a lot of students that walk. So for instance, there's a lot that come from Pin Oak Drive and they can walk to the library for class. There's a couple that are taking Ubers. Some family members transport for our daytime. And then again, it's Southgate, they're walking, if they don't live right there, they're pretty central to where that is. And the same with St. Nick's, like, we had the opportunity to rent and we were at the point of renting at the Catholic Church. And again, that required that everyone would have had to drive their own vehicles.
Yeah, it's not.
So we're in the same scenario when we're looking at, where the community center is.
Thank you. And then the other question, it's probably in the book, but I haven't had a chance to catch up on it. For the students that are so far behind because of the COVID years, where they have those 9 credits, how are they getting the credits?
they're going the competency route. So what we've done is, you know, we brought a lot of kids to the table and we used Odyssey Ware several years ago. And then what we found was we were doing the credit recovery and charging the school, the central office like $35 a course, but not all kids were. That was, you know, for the kid that isn't gonna learn on the Google Meets or Zoom or online, we were missing a whole population of just how we deal with what their learning needs are. So the kids that fell through the cracks, you know, or got doubled up for, say, oh, so you need like 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade English, you know? We'll sign you up for 3 of these courses and, you know, we'll check in with you every month and see how you're doing. And, you know, that would sink you, that would sink me. I would just be gone, you know? So we needed a way to just address that. So we really, through a grant during COVID, it turned out that the high school took on that piece where instead of adult ed paying for Odyssey Ware, it wasn't being used by our adults. You know, that existed when you had somebody who was going to nursing school and came back as an adult and needed a science course. And then we just didn't have the data that supported why adult ed was picking up that piece. And then the kids, you know, some kids did okay with that Odyssey Ware. Then it did move to a summer program and that's gone on for 2 years that Diane can speak more to. So we're reaching those kids that online learning or without some direct support, some hand-holding. That's what we're doing. And then the high set is their pathway. And that's 5 competency-based tests in reading, language arts, reading the language arts for writing, social studies, science, and math. And they're all geared to the college and career readiness standards. So they're not easy. I have to say that the science test, you know, that one's just, we always feel that that's incredibly hard. So I have to say that we do get really bright students that just, they got lost in the shuffle. They're what we call our fast trackers that will come in and they can knock this out in like 4 appointments, you know, 4 testing appointments. And there's others that are in with us 2 or 3 times a week getting the small support, like it's small classroom, individual support.
Thank you for expanding on that. I don't think we can underscore enough how important the services are, especially for those students who got lost during those years.
And they did.
Thank you.
And it's just, you know, it's really heartwarming to see when they make progress. We're celebrating their progress. Every couple of weeks, we're checking in and saying, where are we with so-and-so? Oh, so-and-so only has 1 more to knock out of the park, you know, so we're their social workers.
All right, any other questions for Peter or for Mary Ann? All right.
Well, we've done a great job with time management.
We're wonderful. Right there.
As usual, we're the best. So now on the schedule, we've got a break, and I think the idea was we would grab our dinner. And maybe what we could do is grab our dinner and take our restroom break and come back to the table so that we can soldier on. And Sarah's already been up since 5, 4, 3. Come on, take off.
Okay, you can have this back.
Thank you.
I gave them all
So everybody,
Yeah, we're good.
most kind of, sort of. All right.
So I guess it's my
Now
turn.
it's Sarah's turn.
So to start off, I just want to say our mission at the bus department is to transport as many kids in the community professionally and most important, safely. So we have, whether it be an activity after school, activities during school, you know, our kids to and from school to home. That would be our biggest thing, is to make sure that we are professional and that it's done safely. Celebrating our successes. First off, obviously, we are understaffed, as we have been for many years that I've been here. But my staff have really stepped it up. You know, many of the school districts around us, I noticed on the news in the morning, oh, I'm sorry, this bus will not be transporting kids today. Or, oh, I'm sorry, these buses won't be transporting this afternoon. Fortunately, we have not done that in Scarborough. We have sent messages out saying buses will be running late, whether it be in the morning or in the afternoon. But we have not canceled the bus run like a lot of surrounding communities. So, and I have to contribute that to our staff. Like, they step up. They know who's sick. Everybody in our department has been or will be sick at some point, and everybody steps up around them. One of the things that is helping us to communicate with parents is our Tyler Technologies student accountability. So for the families that we've allowed or that have opted to sign up for the My Ride 360, this morning at 4:00, I knew we were gonna be 2 drivers short. One driver that could help us out, one driver that could help us half out. And when I got to work this morning, I notified the families of a certain bus run, you know, good morning, sorry to inform you, due to a shortage, your child's bus will be running 45 minutes late this morning. You know, easy when the school's in session. Wentworth helped us again today, sending all the families of a certain bus run. So the software also allows us just to notify the families and not this mass email that has to go out. We can pull the kids off buses and notify those families. So that has been a huge success with the Tyler product that we're using. We're gonna go into another phase of that. Instant alerts for kids that might have a bee allergy or, you know, be a diabetic, so that we're not looking through a piece of paper that's folded up in a sealed envelope, stamped confidential. Because when a reaction happens or an emergency happens, you know, that's the last thing my drivers want to be looking for, is this envelope that's sealed. Because they're on the radio with us, we're looking it up, and we're giving them the, so this will be instantaneously on the buses for the drivers, so that, and we've had to call 911 and EMTs relaying the information to them. It will be on the tablets, so that the information will be right to the EMTs as soon as possible also. Another success we have is, even though we're short-staffed, we do have the biggest single largest school department in southern Maine. You know, we transport a majority of our students, you know, to the in-house schools, athletics activities. But one thing that we transport to that a lot of people don't know of is our McKinney-Vento students that are considered homeless or in temporary housing. And every day we transport to out-of-district schools. One's in Kittery that we're gonna start, one's in Lewiston, one's in Auburn, one's in Gray. And I mean, short-staffed with drivers, we're short-staffed ed techs also. And then all the needs that we have of our students that can't ride a regular bus for various reasons, we have to transport them in-house too. So I gotta say, I probably am biased, but I feel I do have the best team to work for. You know, even if someone's having a bad day, myself included, everybody steps up and we do a job that needs to be done for the community. So. Our challenge is how long it takes to get a CDL license. So at any given point, when people call, we always explain to them that it is a long process. It's not overnight. it could take 6 months from the time that they start the process and call us to when they actually get their license, depending on the time of year. They have to go through a new federal regulation on training, X amount of time in a classroom, X amount of time on the road. Then we have to enter it in a database that goes to this federal website to prove that they did the time, and then we can send off the licenses. You know, we're fortunate, we do have a trained driver trainer that we have sent off to be trained. Because you need a certified driver trainer in order to train the staff also. You know, people get frustrated, people don't come to us at 20, 22, 23 to get a job, they're looking for retirement jobs. So, like myself, as I'm aging, I'm a little more frustrated when, you know, we have this process that could take up to 6 months. And there's nothing we can do about it. Without a full staff, I mean, it puts a lot of demands on us, whether it be combining bus routes. Our buses are full, there's no room for combining anymore. And that's why we're sending messages out that will be, I say we never have a bus that's late. They're always safe, but it'll be a later time that we're arriving to pick you up. But again, you know, we're at our capacity, our staff has stepped up, we can't combine any more bus routes. You know, I didn't know we had 11 incoming K students that are gonna need a lot of support, and that's gonna be a huge challenge for next year. You know? There are no more contractors, it used to be easy to call custom coach, they used to help us with a couple of bus runs in the afternoon, we could call them, put our staff member with them. And do a regular bus route, that's not available anymore. You know, the Derigo doesn't have a lot of drivers, they have 4 buses, 4 drivers, and one of those is the owner. You know, so filling all the activities and field trips during the day, and, you know, it is a lot. But we have managed to pull through, and I have to thank my staff for that. You know, what I'm asking for with the budget does allow us to provide safe and secure transportation for all our kiddos. You know, continuing to hire and train new drivers as needed. And follow the ongoing schedule for annual replacement of buses. I know 10 years doesn't seem a lot for a vehicle nowadays, but 10 years of a Scarborough school bus. That's got a lot of hard miles put on it. You know, the roads, the weather conditions, the salt that they put on the roads. And we have top-notch mechanics at Public Works that work on those buses, but at the end of the day, it is about safety. And that's why we keep our, you know, 10-year rotation of the 3 buses. Someday we'll have enough drivers and we will need those buses anyway, or even expand to come up with more buses for activities and athletics at the end of the day, or clubs. You know, our unmet needs, despite that we are having a problem hiring. And you brought up a good point when you asked about salaries. We are lower, you know, but my staff that could leave and go somewhere else have talked about it. But Scaborough's a good community. It's clean, it's safe, it's well respected, you know. But we do need more competitive wages. I think that would, you know, there are a few people that are on the fence. Everything is going up in cost. And if I lived in Biddeford and I had an option to go to Kennybunk for X amount of money, or Scarborough, it's a 50-50 split. They're gonna go. I mean, they're looking for dollars. They're not looking, you know, for anything else. They're looking for health insurance and money. And somebody mentioned working at Amato's. This isn't funny, but it happened to me. Somebody called me for an ed tech position. And I talked through the whole process with them. And then they asked me what the wages were. So I go online and look it up under the contracts and where my bus aides fall. And I have to say, for working in this community for the longest time ever, I told them I couldn't find it because I did not dare to tell them that one of my ed techs could be making more money at McDonald's than what they could driving a minivan in Scarborough and transporting some really highly special needs kids that need a lot of love. Or they could flip a burger. I gotta tell you, I told them, well, you can find it online. For some reason, my computer's not allowing me to go there or whatever. So competitive wages is what we need, not just for my drivers, but for my bus aides as well.
So again, we'll go through a couple of sections and then have a Q&A. So take your notes, hold your thoughts, and Chris Rody's up.
Okay, so a lot of successes this year. I'll echo what everybody said to this point. I mean, I would attribute the successes that you see here to the amazing staff that we have here. We have a lot of special educators and ed techs, related service providers that have worked with us for a very long time. And over the last couple of years, a lot of them have been working in programs that have been short-staffed or staff frequently changing. And this could be really stressful, right? To come in and work with kids who have really complex programs and not know what your staffing is going to look like for the day. So we are just really fortunate to have the quality of staff that we have here, and they are really responsible for everything that you're going to see on the slide. So a couple of things that we've been doing over the past year has been increasing our reading programs, specialized reading programs for students with learning disabilities in the area of reading. We'll hear about a proposal for another position at Wentworth about that in a couple of minutes. But the rewards reading program is a new program we started this year at the middle school. We've also implemented a new evidence-based writing program called Step Up to Writing to supplement or in some place replace what we're using for our gen ed writing curriculum in the special education setting. Certainly last year, I know we talked about, and no change this year, right? The social emotional needs, particularly for our incoming students, continue to grow, both in the intensity of those needs, the complexity of those needs, and the lack of services that these kids are getting before they enter school. And so we were really happy this year to implement a new evidence-based social skills program at the Blue Point School for our social life skills program called Socially Savvy. And that has gone well this year. That's a program we'll probably look at expanding over to our social life skills program at the Eight Corners School in the fall. Last year, we were able to increase our middle school resource staff by 1.0 position. And again, that was focusing on the area of specialized instruction for ELA and in particular reading. And this has really facilitated our ability to provide appropriate grade level grouping and implementation of specialized programs such as rewards and Read Naturally. Without getting too far into the weeds on this, right? It's about more than just providing the program. All of these students have an IEP, they have measurable annual goals, and we have a legal obligation to provide programming that allows those students to make adequate progress with those programs. So having the additional position at the middle school this year has really helped with that piece. We've already talked earlier this evening about the growing population of multilingual learners we have here in Scarborough. Last year, we were able to make a significant increase in our staffing in that department, bringing in an additional teacher and 2 ed techs. We are at our all-time high right now, currently 115 students, multilingual students in Scarborough. I would say before last year, a typical year might be somewhere in the 80s. But it's not just the number of students, it's also the needs of the students that are coming in. So we're seeing many more students who have had significant disruptions in their personal life and their education. They're coming in with academic skills that are markedly lower than we've seen in the past. That really, the additional positions have really helped us, work with those kids for sure. We added a full-time American Sign Language educational interpreter at one of our schools this year to work with one particular student, but that has been a fantastic addition in terms of just a school-wide cultural piece. There's been a lot of education around ASL and deaf culture. So that's been an awesome addition this year. And then finally, trainings and curriculum. Last year, we talked with you about Read Naturally, which is a reading fluency program we started using at the middle school in Wentworth. Continued training with that and expanding that program. Continued training for Aspire, which is another evidence-based reading program. Sounds Sensible, another evidence-based reading program for younger kids. And then, we've also implemented a social skills curriculum at the middle school social life skills program called AIM. Again, looking for, an evidence-based approach to instructing students in those social and emotional skills. And then, finally, this also continues to expand every year. Right now, we provide training for 142 staff members in safety care, and safety care is our program for teaching staff mainly how to successfully work with kids who are escalated and kind of get them back down to baseline, how to set the stage in the classroom or your interactions so students aren't escalating to begin with. And in those cases where students, we're not able to kind of get there with them if they're engaged in a behavior that would be a risk of serious injury to themselves or staff member. These staff are all trained in the use of physical restraint as well. So that's a big commitment that we have in the district to make sure that net is cast wide. So for challenges, everybody's talked about staffing. That's my second bullet here. On Thursday night, we're finally filling our last special education teacher position that has been open all year. We currently have, seven open ed tech positions. That number has kind of fluctuated, I would say, between 5 and 6 and then maybe 9 or 10 throughout the course of the year. That's been a significant challenge. We've touched on the significant SEL needs. I'll talk in a minute about the numbers of Wentworth in terms of specialized instruction and reading. Behavior support we've talked a little bit about. Continuing trend of high level of referrals at K2 and just overall identification. Right now, we're at, I think it's in the budget book, I think we're at about 16 or 17%, 16% identifications for special education. And an additional 9% of our student population are identified under a Section 504 plan. And I know a couple of people were surprised at these numbers last year when they were a little lower. 25% of our population right now has a diagnosed disability. And that disability creates an impact on their daily functioning here at school to the point where they either require accommodations or specialized instruction through an IEP. So I think that just really speaks to the increasing complexity of the students that we have and that we're working with every day here in school. And a couple of other pieces here. Last year, Department of Ed increased eligibility for students with IEPs through age 22. And that's something that we're still kind of working through, like what kind of programming will we have for kids if they're in high school for 7 or 8 years? Is that a full day? Is that a partial day? How do we partner with community services and programs to facilitate that transition? And then finally at the top, I skipped over, as most of you have probably heard, there is legislation in Augusta right now that proposes that the responsibility for FAPE, so for special education services for students aged 3 to 5 will be moving to public school. That legislation is still pending. Right now, they're looking at like a 3-year-ish kind of roll-in of that, starting with a kind of a voluntary phase before we move statewide on that. So more to come on that when we find out what that bill looks like. So that's our challenges. And then our budget proposal, we have three things put forward tonight. So the first is the full-time special education teacher at Wentworth to focus on reading instruction in the areas of decoding fluency. And just a couple of quick numbers for you. We have a real bubble of kids at Wentworth that require this level of intervention. And I think if I were to pinpoint probably the two biggest causes of that, the first would be these are kids who entered school during COVID. And so that foundational work on, phonics and letter sounds and reading all that piece, right? That, didn't go as well as it might have if we were all here in person and in those conditions. And then the second, I think, would be just a growing awareness of the need for us to be providing that type of instruction in the general education setting as well. And over the last couple of years, we've implemented some programs, the phonics reading program that is being used in general education classrooms and other intervention called the Hegarty program, where we're providing them with general education setting. These students at Wentworth are not kids who have had much of that, maybe like a year or two. So there's a big bubble of students. We currently have 94 students at Wentworth who are receiving all of their special education instruction, all the reading instruction in special education, and approximately 70 of these students are in our resource groups, right? So the challenge here is finding the right groupings for kids to make these programs effective. And just to give you a quick idea of the variety of reading programs that we're using right now, we use a program called Spire. We have some kids getting Orton Gillingham instruction. We use Wilson Reading, Read Naturally, Linda Bell reading programs. We've just introduced a new program this week someone's looking at called Rewards. These programs all hit slightly different needs for kids in reading. And the point here being that if we have a student that we're starting the Spire program, and that's kind of our foundational evidence-based program for this, and not making sufficient progress, we need to dig into the reasons why, but we really need to be prepared to offer these other programs either as supplemental programs or to replace Spire. And so what this position will allow us to do is to create that flexibility around grouping and meet the needs of those students. The next one, excuse me, I think we talked about a little bit, the incoming kindergarten class. So we have, I think it's actually 12 now, because we just found out about a new student this week, but we have, at the time we put this together, 11 students who are currently receiving services that essentially look like one-to-one adult support in their preschool programs. We have one student, I think, who's not in any programs, but kind of has that profile. And this is an unusually large number. Like, you've never had this many students moving in the fall in Scarborough with this level of need. And I think, one way I can describe why this is so important is if you think about the fact that most of these students are in small programs or partial day. I don't think it's realistic to say that when they come in for a full day of kindergarten in a bigger building, that these needs are going to be going down, right? I mean, these are students with, some of these students will be probably in our functional life skills programs. So working on just basic communication, self-care, things of those nature. And some of those students are students with social and emotional behavioral needs as well. So the process for us is once we find out about which students are currently receiving IEP services through CDS, is our K2 consulting teacher, Bridget Del Vecchio, goes out with a team from one of the K2 buildings, and we visit all of these students in their preschool programs. We collect all that information, and then in the April to May timeframe, we'll be doing IEP meetings on all of these students. So this information here is based on not just what we've seen in the records from CDS, it's also based on the observation of our staff who, again, gone out, talked with staff in the program, seen the students, and a lot of experience, with people out there. So it's a lot of positions, but I think it is absolutely critical to our ability to meet the needs of our incoming kindergartens this year. And then finally, our final proposal, as Kim said, is to move funding from federal grant money to a local budget. This is for a 0.5 speech language pathologist specializing in assistive augmentative communication and assistive technology. A couple of facts on this position. We have a lot of students here in Scarborough who use AAC to communicate as their primary communication device. These devices are getting better and better over time, which is amazing for kids. They're also getting more complex over time. A lot of them are based now on apps, which change frequently. And so the three pieces that this position allows us to do are to conduct AAC evaluations to identify what the right match is for the student. The second thing is to train staff on the use of this and implementing these devices. And then the final piece of that puzzle is follow up with staff and changing programs as students' language abilities grow. And that's a big part of the job as well. That's the bulk of what this position does. In addition to this, though, she's also doing a lot of work, and I really want her to focus more in the future as well on just implementing some assistive technology pieces in our general education classrooms as part of accommodations for kids on their IEPs. So how can we leverage assistive technology, which again is, expanding at a, pretty exponential rate, I guess you would say. How can we leverage that to make our general education settings more accessible for our kids with disabilities, and how can we basically have more inclusive practices here, in Scarborough? To me, this position, there's a lot of potential to help with that. Last thing, because I'm sure I'm over my 15 minutes, but unmet needs. This has sort of evolved as we've learned more about the incoming CDS class. So just a heads up that we have, it's 44 students coming in overall. We have 6 students who are currently in referral. As someone mentioned earlier, that's over 20%, I think, of the incoming kindergarten class. One of our one unmet need here is around speech services, and I have too much paper here. Here it is. If you total up the amount of IEP service time, as those IEPs currently exist, and again, those are going to be, gone through at the IEP meetings in April and May with us, but it's essentially about 46 hours per week of service time. And so I've met with some of our speech language pathologists. We're looking at trying to combine groups for kids. We're looking at whatever efficiencies we can come up with. Some of these students may be dismissed before they join us if they are getting speech services. It could be a student, for example, getting articulation. They might meet their goals and be dismissed, and this number may be a little bit lower, but that is something that is definitely on my radar, and we'll know more about that once we get through the CBS IEP meetings by probably mid to late May. So, all right, well, that's special services.
Great. Next up is health services, and I'm going to fill you in on that on behalf of our nursing staff. So if we start with celebrating successes, we are very fortunate to have a dedicated team of 9 in the district. And so what that ensures is that all of the students in the district have equitable access to making sure that their health needs are met. At each of our small schools, we have a dedicated full-time RN, and our larger schools on municipal campus has 2 medical staff in each of the clinics, just again, to meet the needs of the volume of students that we have. This year, with the support of our application specialists in the district, we were successful in transitioning all of our health records and tracking historically and moving forward into a new module of PowerSchool, which is our student information system. And so, although prior to this year, our nurses had a lot of duplication because they had another program called Health Office Today. And so we had to maintain a separate database for that, and they would log information in there, although they would have to access PowerSchool to get parent contact information and all of the other things. They worked real closely with our application specialists over the summer, and all of that has morphed over to PowerSchool Health and has allowed for a lot of streamlining to be all within one platform. So that was no small task. And, kudos to both our application specialists who supported this effort, as well as, to our nursing team who really, some of them were very much accustomed to using the same platform for a long-standing period of time. And they, had a growth mindset and were open to learning a new platform, and they really have, said great things about it. So again, our application specialists are continuing to support them over time, but that seems to be going very well. In terms of challenges, our current story in health services isn't that different than some other things that you've heard about tonight. And for them, it is, finding substitutes to fill in when one of them, might be out sick. So, this is not a problem that is only germane to Scarborough, just as the other problems that we've talked about, right? When I talk with, my colleagues in other districts, they're experiencing the same challenges that we are. Luckily for us, we do have a deep team in terms of the number of nursing staff that we have. And we also have some really amazing members, because people really do step up and help one another out. So, you know, it might be that a nurse in one of our small schools says, you know, what's the priority time at your school? I can go over there for a couple of hours. So what we're maintaining is access to health services at every school every day. Sometimes when we're short-staffed, that might not mean all 6 hours of the school day. But again, I just can't say enough about the commitment that our team has to one another and to our students to make sure that students' needs are being addressed. Our budget proposal really just allows us to maintain required and appropriate medical services for each school based on student needs. So there really are no new asks for this year. We're just trying to, you know, move forward in a way that allows us to make sure that these needs are being met for our students.
And I would encourage people who aren't familiar with the day-to-day health services to get into the budget book and look at the display of all of the tasks that the school nurses are tasked with during the course of a day. It's just remarkable, the services that
Yeah.
are provided across the district.
I mean, that is a great point, Kate, because, you know, I think that when, you know, when somebody typically thinks about what does a school nurse do, people think,
Band-Aids
oh,
and aspirin.
you have a bellyache, you're throwing up, you need a Band-Aid because you have a boo-boo. That is scratching the surface. You know, our nurses are providing, in some cases, very discreet medical care, feeding kids on feeding tubes, monitoring diabetes numbers. There is just a whole host of things that they're responsible for, in addition to those things that just come up on a day-to-day basis. They have so many scheduled medications and services that they provide to our students. And what we know about kiddos is they have to have those basic needs being met to be able to, you know, at some other point access their education. And this district has shown a great commitment to that. And I know that our staff is thankful for that. And I know that our families are as well, because I think that when families send their students to our schools, they know that their students' needs are not going to go unaddressed.
All right, I think we're at Q&A again. So transportation, special services and health services are up.
We want to start with Sarah.
Start with Sarah, send the woman home.
That's right.
Yes.
No, I covered mine.
I covered mine earlier as well. I think Carolyn might have one.
I do have some page, but I didn't hear someone. Just out of curiosity, like, how many FTEs are you down?
Full-time drivers?
Yeah.
We have 19, we need 23.
Okay.
You're down 4.
We're down 4, oh, we're 17. We need
Yeah,
23.
you're down 6.
We're down 6.
Yeah.
I've said this before, but I'll tell you to keep Rick, whatever you have to do.
We have 2 Ricks.
Oh. They're both equally great.
Okay. Miss Sue is wonderful. She's over here, but I used to have Miss Sue. But, yeah.
I am lucky. They have a
Yes.
great team.
You really, I've never had, you know, all the bus drivers are bus drivers we've had over the years have had different personalities, but they've all been incredible. I love them all. So.
Very fortunate.
So, I don't know how you do what you do, but thank you.
You're welcome.
I have two questions. I just want to highlight something that you said. I want, it's very clear that for you, in order to retain and attract qualified bus drivers of the six that you need a great design.
We need higher wages.
So make sure you said it, say it
Absolutely.
again. And then this is my plug because they can't go very long without talking about school buses. Favorite thing to talk about at meetings. And so it's more, this is less question for you, more highlight for the rest of the board. We've always funded through the school buses through bonding. This is, I think, the first budget year, and Kate will correct me if I'm wrong, that we're actually taking that out of long-term capital funding. So we are changing the way that we're funding our buses, and that's in response to the town council's suggestions last year. And it's subtle because it's the same number, but it's coming from a different account, which should reduce bonding in the future. But I just want to highlight that because it's important that folks know that we did that. We've saved money for it. We'll try to keep saving money for buses. But it's a pretty significant shift of expenses that in the future, if we weren't so able to roll over money into our accounts, we may be unable to do with as much ease as Kate has found this year too. And we put away quite a bit of money in that capital. We put 600,000 away.
Now, we've got about 800,000 in there right now. And I think, you know, one of the conversations we'll have to have as we're going through is are those for buses or are those for our worries about what's going on with the building project? We've had sort of the beginnings of some thoughts about whether that reserve money should be something that we hang on to. But the funding source for any kind of expenditure, if we can take from capital reserves, then we're reducing our borrowing in the future.
I'm gonna walk it back. I do have a question.
Absolutely.
I'm just still rolling around with what Leanne said earlier, and I'm gonna ask this without any understanding of if this is even possible.
Okay.
If we, as a policy committee in with Mike and Jeff and Diane, were able to create a policy that allows students to drive themselves to events, would that be helpful? With the shortage?
Possibly. I mean, then you're gonna fall back on, do we pick and choose the days? Do we say if you have sports trips on a certain day, we don't have enough drivers, or is it gonna be across the board? We're not transporting to, that would be what the helpful part would be. It would be in a pinch. Probably wouldn't help us that much, but if it was across the board, if you had a baseball practice at Wiley Field at the end of Tenny Lane, you had to get your transportation there, that would be great. But if you're saying it in a pinch, I think more problems would come to it. Would come with it. One being, what if it was, and I don't know a lot about this, I hope I don't speak out of turn, but I wouldn't want to put one athletic team or club against another. And what if it happened to one club more often than it happened to another club? Or what if it happened to a club and not a sports team, or, because it's gonna depend on the situation that it would ever happen. So unless it was a blanket policy that would say if you're whatever it was, club or team was within this distance or within this locale, you have to transport yourself there. I think sometimes it could create more problems than not.
Yeah. Because I don't know how we would have a blanket policy because not all of our high schoolers obviously, right, are of driving age and parents aren't home and all the things, but.
What do you do with the freshman that makes a varsity team?
Right.
I mean,
Well, and I think the other thing I would add to that is we don't want to create a policy that would encourage students to break the law. For example, new
Driving with
drivers are
friends.
not supposed to
Yes.
have friends in their vehicles.
Right.
And if we changed our policy to say students can drive themselves, I would really be worried that students would not be following the law.
As well as the liability for
Correct.
taking other students.
Right.
Right, and then they
In their
would lose
car.
their license, their parents could incur all kinds of other
Right, I was
lovely
thinking in the
problems.
sense of avoiding canceling events and canceling sporting games
Right,
or
but-
whatever it is, but
I
I
think
think
that's
the
why
other
we've
side-
chosen to say parents instead of students.
oh,
Yes. But it's tough if you gonna pick and choose a day and activities.
Exactly.
You don't wanna pit teams against each other, boys versus girls, girls versus boys, because that falls under a whole new category. So I would just assume, hopefully doesn't happen and we keep moving forward and we get to hire new staff. But if you're gonna talk about wages, I know special needs talks about my bus aides, they seem to fall under special needs, but they still come out of my budget. And I have to tell you, as some of you know, my van drivers are, whether they have a bus license or not, are still really responsible for a lot in the day.
Mhm.
So their wages are out there that probably should be increased also, not just, I mean, people seem to overlook bus aides as a whole different category. They're just as important as my bus drivers, so I have to put that plug out there for them also.
but they fall under the, ed tech contract, is what you're saying?
Support
It's-
staff budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just piggybacking off what you were asking, Shannon. So what do, and I think I heard somebody mention about other towns do it differently, like we provide a lot of transportation.
Okay,
to
so
other towns.
my kids went to Washington School Department.
Yeah.
My son was a hockey player. He had practiced at USM.
Yeah.
Whether he made it to practice or not, I was supposed to provide him transportation to and from USM for practice. Where I have to say, it's very fortunate in this community that when we have hockey teams, 1, 2, or 3, we provide transportation. It's not just for an MPA game. We provide transportation to our guys and gals that play at Peterson Field, Wyland Field, and all the other fields around the community. Those would be things that we would cancel first, but I gotta say, our transportation department, we do whatever we can, whether it means adding 15 kids to a bus run and take them out to Smelling Hill Farm so they can make it to their cross-country meet. Like, we've been really creative to get kids to where they need to be. Unlike some of the communities around us that don't have that ability, to get our kids where they are, and that's based on our staff. You know,
I
what they
think
can
too,
do.
Sarah, you'll remember this because you've been here as long as I have, that it's been a real priority for the board and administration, the safety issue of having kids, and you touched on it a minute ago.
Mhm.
But, you know, being able to say, yes, we have a bus for you, yes, that's the best way for you to get somewhere. You know, as much as it's not been easy to do.
Whether or not your
Right.
family has the resources to get you somewhere.
Right,
Right.
right.
I mean, safety is huge. There's a brick out in front of the school building. This building was built that my bus drivers bought with money that we pooled together, and it says Scarborough Bus Department, never late, always safe. And that's just the way it is. And we have parents that call in the middle of a blizzard. They're like, my bus is late. Oh, it is? I've never had a bus late. And they're like, oh, it's not here. And I go, oh, they're being safe, you know, it's like a blizzard out
That's
there.
different.
And we're safe. And they're like, yeah, I guess you're right, you know. Like, it's huge. And I say to my drivers all the time, I personally, I would like to see everybody get to school when school's supposed to start, but that's not my priority. My priority is it's a safety. If you're on an icy road and we have to pull over and stop until a plow truck has gone out there with sand to get you off the road, and it has happened, then you sit there. Like, we're just gonna call the school and say, this bus is running late. We'll be there as soon as we can. It's not a race against time. It's not, you know, it's about safety.
Sarah, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that, like, when Sarah says, bus aid, the bus aides are also the van drivers for
Correct.
our students who have
Mhm.
special
Correct.
transportation. So they're not just an extra body on the
No.
bus, they are driving
Driving
vans. And so there
vans,
are
they're safety
times.
care trained, they're in and out of this district, they're handling some pretty.
And there are times where we have had to ask parents
Parents
to
to take their kids to
transport
school.
their children to school because we don't have enough bus aids. And so, you know, some of the parents that Sarah mentioned that have students going to Lewiston and Auburn and Gray and student Kittery, those are the parents that are often bringing their children when we don't have enough drivers to make those runs. And so I just want to make sure that like bus aid is interchangeable with van driver.
Yeah, it's one position. We call them bus aides, but they could be, but we rotate them through so that they get to learn all the kids, all the routes, all the students, different timings, so there's no surprise for both them or the student. So they all drive. They may for a week be in a passenger seat, or a lot of times it's me in that passenger seat being the bus aide. You know, as they're driving out of district, I mean, and we do have called parents, some out of district, some in district, and I'm sorry, unfortunately, we have, you know, we don't have enough staff to be there at our regular time. We can pick your child up at 9 o'clock and get them to school. Very fortunate that as long as you are honest with the people in this community and you tell those families exactly what's going on, 99% of the time, if they're able to take their child to school, they're taking their child to school. You know, and they'll say, anytime, Sarah, give me a call. Thanks for what you do anyway, or sorry to hear that you're short-staffed, or so we are fortunate.
I imagine that since they're also safety care trained, they're probably also dealing with some really challenging behaviors.
In a very
While
small
driving.
space. In a minivan, because we have not had the luxury of having a quote unquote special needs bus run on the road for many years because we need their driver's license. And again, our staff can drive minivans. Anybody, they don't need special licenses for that. So along with that comes more need for more bus aids, the need for more vans. And now you're in a cramped space. Like I drove a 3-seated Trailblazer, and when my 2 younger ones were really little, it wasn't big enough. So imagine being put in a minivan where some of the seats have been removed because they needed to be removed. And now you put 2 kiddos in there or a staff member, or we have 5-point harness seats that take up a lot of room. And, you know, even though guys are little or gals are little, it's a small space when somebody's having a really bad day. So, yeah.
I will say the underlying theme from everybody tonight about the staff caring for each other and the staff filling in for each other and the staff having each other's back is really, really awesome to hear. I think we all know that we have amazing people, but it's really, really nice to hear that, you know, to just keep hearing examples of it.
At the end of the day, it is about the kids.
That is true. All right, what about Chris? Any questions for Chris?
So many questions for Chris. Sorry.
You need a
That's
cookie
okay.
before we get started?
I want to highlight one of the pieces, the unmet need.
Yep.
Because these are the most vulnerable kids. Can you explain what is the detriment for not having that support level for them at the K2?
So are you talking, Leanne, about the speech language position or that, okay? So, you know, the first and foremost, right, like if we are in a position, once we complete all of our CDS meetings, we know who's coming, we know what those speech levels look like. And I've already, again, kind of spoken with the speech team, we're gonna meet in May to go through all this. If we're at a point where we look at everybody's schedules, we look at different formats for providing those services for kids, we're either gonna have enough, you know, people hours to meet the IEP needs or we're not. And if we're in the we're not category, then, you know, I'm gonna have to look for some other funding to potentially hire a contract service or a halftime person or whatever that might be. So like we won't enter the school year unable to provide FAPE for these students. It's just a little unclear at this point, like what that need is gonna look like. Yeah,
Can you say what FAPE means for people in this
Oh.
room that might not know that?
thank you. Yes, FAPE is free and appropriate public education. So kind of shorthand, what that means is when we have an IEP for a student, is the student able to make adequate progress on their IEP goals? Are they able to receive their services? That's what, the provision of FAPE basically is. That's our obligation, right? It's more than just providing a plan. It's providing a meaningful opportunity for the student to make progress on that plan. And if the student isn't making progress, that we convene as a team, we go through different options, programming options, all those pieces, so.
Thank you, because I wasn't sure if this was one of those positions that we would be advocating for to say, we absolutely have to make sure this is covered because of that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Sure.
Because I actually have a very similar concern. So if I'm understanding, this is not a mandated position or else it would be in the budget. So
Yeah.
is that correct? Okay, so when I do the math, that those 2 bullets is 48 hours worth of work.
Yeah.
And so
So how
I'm
we-
with Leanne where I don't know that this isn't something that should rise to the level of being
Yeah.
in the budget.
Yeah, and so a couple of things about that, right? The first is that, as I said before, like, we're gonna have a better picture once we go through our CDS IEP, right? Because some of these students have been receiving speech services, and it's not unusual for us to hear at the transition meeting that kids are gonna be ready, for example, with articulation. They may have met their articulation goal, some of these students may be dismissed, right? The other, factor here, I think, is just the number of positions that I have in the budget in the first place tonight, right? I mean, I don't think we've ever come forward to a budget proposal before and asked for 11 new ed tech positions. And, so I just feel like at this point, I really need to know more about what those speech needs are going to look like. And, but our commitment is we'll find a way to hire staff if we need to do that. Again, we're not gonna start the year in a position where we're unable to provide IEP services. That's not the option. So, one potential source of funding might be looking at our federal funding as an unexpected expense, right? Those are the types of things that we might be looking at. So, yeah, does that help answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a third follow-up.
Yeah.
Sort of, I'm also very anxious at the idea of this being an unmet need, not so much as sort of what the plan is, so folks coming in from CDS. You have a handle on where they are, you'll have a better handle on where they are in May, and so you kind of plan for them. I know that, you always get surprises in the school year of kids who get identified through that process. And the unidentified students who are coming in, some in that kindergarten class, if you have that many identified, then statistically you have some that have not been identified yet.
Yeah.
And then other kids who have needs that emerge through the years. I'm assuming you've taken that into account with the budget, just so that you're not in a position where it's an unforeseen. I'd rather ask now than be begging later.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'll hear about that probably tomorrow from the K2 building principals, right? Again, about kids who come in, haven't been in service, have not been identified. It's their first time in a school setting, what do we do with those students? It's hard to budget for them since we don't know they're coming. And I would say, Frayla, that again, the unknown is part of special education budgeting, right? Because I could have a student move in to the middle school in November that requires a lot of equipment, a one-to-one aid.
Like this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both things up, yeah.
Yeah, and so, how we meet those funding questions, I just asked Kate for the money and she. But there is some give that's built into our federal funding that allows us to kind of meet those unexpected needs. And we've been able to do that kind of following this model over the years. Is that?
Yeah, and I would say in recent years, one of the things that we've been able to trade on, which is awful, is that we haven't been able to fill all of our positions.
Right.
And so we've had some flexibility in terms of, let's say you have those 11 positions in the budget, but you can only fill 9 of them and you have a need for speech services. Well, then you say, okay, well, we're going to cobble this together and make sure that the needs are being met for these kids' IEPs, but we might be doing it in a different way.
Again,
But the federal grant is actually really cool because it's the one place that the government gives us in Scarborough a significant amount of money outside of our regular budget for special services.
And again, the idea being that there is some flexibility built right into that.
Into
grant
that
to
budget.
anticipate some of these unexpected needs. So, Let's say, for example, that it turns out we do need like a half-time speech person, in the fall to meet the IEP needs. I might be back here, next spring saying, we carried this position through the federal grant for this year. And now I need to move this into the local budget. That's kind of typically how that piece would go. So,
We did exactly that with an ESSER funded position. Moved it into the budget when the ESSER funds went away.
Well, you may be able to answer the next question then. If we have 11 situations where we need to have ed techs, but we can't fill the positions, how are we supporting the kids?
well, there's, that's the big question everybody's asking these days, right? And there's a couple of different answers to that, Leanne, I think. And, the first is, we have, reached out, to contract with a staffing agency. We have 2 positions this year that we're contracting with. And so that's a possibility, and that's something that I'm already exploring with them to see if they might have some availability for the fall, if we are in that position where we can't be fully staffed. We have another model that we are working on with one student now that we're looking at expanding potentially, which would be, it gets a little complicated, but essentially it would be looking at students who need one-to-one behavioral support. And if that student is basically kind of eligible through main care, we can create a relationship with an outside provider like Woodford's Family Services, for example, where they will provide behavioral health, BHP, behavioral health professional, which is essentially the same thing as an ed tech, but with some additional training. That person comes with a clinician that provides clinical services. So that's another way to bring staff in. That relationship can be complicated with the outside provider because those people are not working under our supervision. The clinician is typically a DCBA who's designing a behavior plan. They're going to have their own professional opinion about what should be in that plan. And so that arrangement is very much dependent upon positive working relationships with us and the outside agency. It can definitely work. It's working great for us this year. But that's, there's a potential downside there. Another piece that we've done, and we would certainly consider for the fall, would be potentially combining 2 ed tech positions to hire a professional staff. So a couple of years ago, for a social life skills program here at Wentworth, we were able to fill those ed tech positions. We combined 2 of those and created an OT position that works pretty much exclusively with the social life skills program. The upside to that is you're getting potentially somebody with, more training, I guess, and background than a typical ed tech would, although lots of our ed techs have a ton of experience and training. But the downside to that is you have to find a candidate who's willing to come in and understand that their area of practice is not really all they're going to be doing there, right? Like they're going to be spending some time working with kids, doing things that an ed tech might do. And if you find someone who's flexible enough and is fine with that, then that can be a great solution, right? But that has to be clear to the person coming in. So that's another thing we would look at, related services, OT, speech potentially, behavior specialists. We now have 5, PCBAs on staff here in Scarborough, and that's how we created one of those positions last year. And then, so I think that's kind of the first layer of things that, that we would look at addressing. So, yeah. And then, the other piece is, it's just, hats off to Nicole, who we're very fortunate to have here, and you can't ever leave. But Nicole has spent a lot of time on the ground in schools this year, working directly with kids, working with staff. And so that's part of it too, right? I mean, that just, depending on what that looks like in the fall, that maybe is a bigger part of our job than it typically is. And I would say the same thing for our building administrators too. So it's a complicated question. We do have some different solutions to look at. And it's something that I talk a lot about with other special ed directors in Cumberland County, right? Because everybody's in the same boat these days.
Can I piggyback off your 11? We'll just, tag team right off this whole thing. Okay, am I understanding correctly that they asked for 11 is there because I presume nobody in the, K-2 schools right now are graduating to the next level to free up a one-on-one support specialist. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, so actually what we typically look at is, do we have kids graduating? We
Right.
have
From
one-on-one
high
support and move those positions. down
Like
to
back
K2,
over.
And we don't have anybody graduating this year that currently have one. And that's partly a function of kids being here until they're 22.
Yeah, right, you're holding on to them longer.
Holding on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, and then my second to the 11, when you contract out, my question's gonna be very similar to what I asked over here. Is that, knowing what you know about the pay that they require, is it, financially, is it a better picture if we hire and pay a little bit more our own staff, knowing that we pay benefits, sick leave, vacation leave, all the things, versus contracting that position out, which is going to be more affordable to the district?
I'll answer your question a little differently than you asked it, and then I'll answer your actual question. It is 100% unquestionably better for us to be hiring our own staff. And part of the issue that we have right now is that even the staffing agencies can't necessarily provide all the staff that we need. So it's not like they're saying, sure, we'll charge you $200 an hour and we'll fill all of your empty positions. Like, they're struggling to find people to come in as well. So it's not just as simple as, we'll contract it out and we can fill these positions and it'll cost a lot of money. That may not be an option either, you know? And then the other piece of it is just, it is really important, I think, to have just a direct relationship with the people that are working with us, right? I mean, that gives us the ability to provide the training that we want to provide feedback that we want to provide. And hopefully, you know, grow these people into, you know, teaching positions, or even one of us may have started as an ed tech here and is currently the director of special services, right? I mean, you know, we have brought a lot of people along over the years, and that has been so important to the success of our programs. And so, you know, when you're bringing in contractors, it's just not, it's not the same.
And the broader field is trying to support that too, right? With, I don't know if you've noticed in the newsletter, the Educator Apprenticeship Program, which is a program through the Department of Labor and SMCC, so that we can hire people who literally, you know, might just be high school graduates, so we could hire them at like Ed Tech 1 status, and then they can get all of their coursework free from SMCC. And they also work for us full time while they're doing that, and they get 30 credit hours for workforce credits. And now that relationship is being extended with USM, so that USM is accepting that. And so somebody could literally go from having zero education to becoming a full-fledged special education teacher at, you know, again, SMCC completely free. And then USM, I think they're still trying to work out, you know, what they can do to make the financial aspect of that. But USM has already agreed to take those 30 workforce credits and apply those to their bachelor's degree, which is kind of unprecedented at the bachelor level.
For sure. Yeah, I think for the pure math question of it, it does cost a little bit more for the contracted services. But it's less drastically more than you might expect. And I think that the intangibles of having somebody on staff that Chris just spoke to, it's a whole different ballgame, for sure. It's definitely preferable.
And the only reason why it's not so expensive is because those people don't get our benefits.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And so the cost of benefits is
Yeah, it's much,
It's not the hourly wage, it's the.
right, it's about the package, yeah.
Chris, what support do you need from the board to help you be more competitive in hiring ed techs? I know there's not enough no matter what to go around. But sort of what can this district do to position itself so that we're able to get as many ed tech positions filled as possible?
I mean, I guess I would echo what everybody else has said tonight, Frail. I mean, that to a certain extent, it's a matter of pay, right? And I think, you know, this is overgeneralizing for sure, because we have a lot of ed techs and they come to us for all different reasons, right? But in general, I think in the past, you could kind of look at two kind of broad categories of people who are applying for ed tech positions. And those are people who have an interest in getting into education. And this is kind of like an entry level position for them. It's a foot in the door. Do I like to do this? If I do, I'm connected with the school district. I want to move on to become a teacher. And then you also have people who a lot of times will have, family needs and the schedule works out great for them, right? They come in, they're here during school hours, boom, then they're home and they're done. And I think for that second group of people, there's just more options out there at that pay level, right, than there used to be, right? And people can't hire people anywhere, right? So it becomes a tougher sell to say, you know, to take a little bit of an extreme example, but come in and work with a student who's physically aggressive, a student who might bite you, a student who might spit on you, right? That's a harder sell if the pay is the same as everybody's been talking about, you know, working at a fast food place or something like that for some people, right? For some people. So, and then I think for the first group of people, just the you know, the pay, that's a problem getting people into education in general these days, right? Like I want to become a teacher down the road. Boy, that salary doesn't look all over that great compared to some other things I can do, right? So it's a barrier there too. At the end of the day, you know, we certainly have, Nicole does most of the interviewing for ed techs and, you know, we'll hear from time to time, I'm going somewhere else because, you know, somebody else is paying more. We're not totally out of whack with what other districts are paying right now. But certainly, you know, having a more attractive, package in terms of, you know, pay and benefits would certainly help, for sure.
I do think too, that we may not be that far removed from other districts, but like special purpose private schools are paying significantly better.
Yeah.
And offering more hours and year-round work, right? So, they're getting 5 more hours a week. Plus, they don't have that big gap in the summer or April and February breaks because they're getting vacation time. They're accruing that. And so I think that also plays a big role in, when people are deciding, you know, where to be in ed tech.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't be just looking at other public school districts, we should also be looking at, I know the private schools that you're talking about, special ed schools also to compete.
I mean, I don't know if we'd ever be able to compete with them. We
We can't compete around, I mean, like, there's certain things you can't.
pretty high, but it's worth digging into and taking a peek, because that's where a lot of people are going, that I often call and say, hey, I want you to come work for us, and they'll say, I'm going to this special purpose private school.
Awesome.
With the 22 students, what is the timeline that we have to be compliant?
Last year.
Okay,
They're
so we're past it.
We're doing.
Past it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're past it, yeah.
Okay.
And,
That was immediately effective
yeah,
legislation, which was interesting.
yeah, went into effect last winter, spring, I think,
Mhm.
so.
So that's gonna tie into the 3-5-year-old support. Expect that it will also be immediate.
Well, the current proposal is, I'm not sure if it's a 3 or 4 year phase in. There was just an amendment that was made to the original bill. I'm not completely up to speed on that, but initially it was a 3-year phase in across the state, and they were looking for 1/3 of districts to take over the IEP responsibilities for 3 to 5-year-olds. So it's going to be on a voluntary basis, 1/3 this year, 1/3 the following year, the rest of the 3rd year. I heard something at a meeting on Friday that made it sound like it was maybe pushed out 1 year beyond that currently in terms of being a mandatory piece. But certainly nothing that indicates it will be coming down the road for us like this fall, probably not.
Just thought we should ask the question to make sure that you're covered. Just
Yeah.
in case.
Yeah, oh, you'll be hearing from me if it's coming through.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Just wanted to-
Yeah.
And with that, I've asked a lot of questions. Chris, thank you. Thank you so much for all of this information.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, but listen, it's complicated. We're asking for a lot of positions this year. We didn't need it. So, I'm absolutely happy to answer as many questions as people have about it. For sure, because the need is real, and that's my job, is to be here tonight and help explain, you know, why that is and what the facts are. So, yeah.
Right.
No questions? Are you all set?
I'm all set.
Okay. So, first of all, and this is just complete ignorance speaking here, so forgive me. Do students ever outgrow their IEP needs, or are they always in an IEP K through 12?
Yeah,
What?
yeah. Great question, great question. So our goal, is to, have every student be in, what we call the least restrictive environment. We call that, the term for that is LRE, okay? And so, we have some students that we know are gonna need special education services. They're gonna need an IEP as long as they're in public school. But we have a lot of other students that, our goal is to get them off of an IEP, get them out of, special services, get them back into the general education setting. And our benchmark for that is really looking at the progress they're making on their IEP goals. And I spoke earlier about the reading programs, right? Every student will have a database goal that'll have something called the present level of performance. So basically, how are they reading right now? Very specific, right? Where do we expect them to be a year from now? And we grade that every time the report cards come out. And that's how we, guide our progress and so as we're getting closer. So yes, absolutely. That's our goal for a lot of kids is to, get them back in the full gen headspace.
Okay, that's awesome, that's awesome. Piggybacking on some of the discussion already with the 11 proposed new ed techs, does that include the 7 open positions you have already, or is this in addition to?
No, that's in addition to.
Okay, that's what I thought. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm still learning here. These ed tech positions, those are mandatory, correct?
Yeah, the reason I would say they're mandatory is because we'll need them to be able to implement these students' IEPs and allow them to participate. So, one way to think about this would be if we have an incoming K student who has a lot of behavioral needs. And, the other thing to remember about this incoming group, some of these kids did not receive services as 3-year-olds. Their services started as 4-year-olds, right? So in the past, they might have had 2 years of high quality intervention before they came to us. This year, not so. So if they come into school in the fall, they have, behavioral self-regulation needs. A lot of them will have communication needs. The problem with not having somebody there to work directly with them is it could be safety, right? It could be bullying, it could be oppression, it could be any number of things. At a minimum, though, what we're gonna have is a student who they cannot work independently at all. And without that level of staffing there, like, we're gonna get halfway through the year and be like, this student hasn't made any gains on their IEP at all. And that's where the problem is in not having these positions, is just not being able to make progress on those goals. In addition to the other things that people probably think about, safety and those things, right? So I don't know if that helps explain it at all.
Yeah, no, that does.
Okay.
And then just thinking about the meeting we had with the curriculum committee a few weeks back, is there any, I'm trying to phrase my question here, just anything in particular that we're doing new or different with the Gates program this year?
We are looking at, I think we may have talked about this a little bit in our meeting. We are looking at our screening process for eligibility and how we're using the main 3-year assessment or NWA as a screening tool. Those have changed a little bit this year. And so we're looking at what percentages we're looking at for identification. We're using a newer version of the COGAT, which is like an abilities test that we use as part of the screening process. Looking at things like cut scores for that piece. Those are probably the only tweaks I'm looking at with that group for the coming year. Further down the road, it's always kind of an open conversation about like what's best practice in terms of identification for gifted students. But that's the kind of the short-term plan.
Question about, going back to our education. If we can't meet those needs of those really challenging behaviors like elopement and aggression and all, and you somehow determine that this might not be the environment for them, then they have to go elsewhere, but we are also still paying for that tuition elsewhere. And then, I mean, I imagine that gets pretty costly also, when you have to outsource that.
So that would be, right, we would call that an out-of-district placement. And, again, anytime we're working with a student and we're not able to make progress on their IEP goals, like our obligation is to find a program that allows us to do so. And it's, conceivable, I guess, that, we could have a student that because of some staffing shortages, we're not able to make that progress. I would say our staff really does a great job, and it's certainly a focus for us. Those students are on everybody's radar as needing, typically the most support. And so we'll do whatever we can to get support to those kids. But it's, not out of the realm of the possible that could potentially lead to an out-of-district replacement. Possibly, yeah.
Anyone good here? Thank you both so much.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you for all the questions. Like I said, happy to go through this for sure. So. And appreciate all the support as well from the community, right? I mean, we run a lot of programs, we have a lot of staff. And, I tell people all the time, we are very, very fortunate here to be as well supported as we are by the community in Scarborough. And when we talk about things like staff retention, it's not just about the money, it's about the quality of your working environment. And, if we're able to be fully staffed, have enough people on the ground to work with kids, that feels good to people. People stay for those things, right? And I know for sure there are other districts around us that don't have that level of support. So I'm very appreciative of that piece. That's one of the things that's kept me here in Scarborough, sure, right?
Is everybody asleep? We're past our bedtime. We've got 3 more segments. Do we want to power on? People need to go pee. Good, power on.
There's more cookies.
More cookies. All right. Our friend Katie, this is her first shot at this. This is pretty exciting.
So I'll begin by saying there aren't any major changes or things I'm bringing forward, right? As a new director, one of my goals and obligations is to really listen and learn in this first year about what is happening in the district and going on around me. And I did go back to last year's budget book to look at the successes and challenges and unmet needs and reflect on how much of that is still current or changed in this current year. And I have to say that one of the things that I really value about Scarborough is as I've begun to take in feedback and information and work with groups is that there has been a continuous investment in really high quality curriculum in the district, particularly around the supports that allow us to address student needs in the classroom and track the data that supports that decision-making process. So I didn't really organize it well, but I started with iReady because iReady is the diagnostic we use K-2. It's the diagnostic we choose to use because it's not required by the state. Like they use the main through year 3 to 8 and at 10. We use the diagnostic K-2 and at 9th grade. And that investment in iReady is a really that iReady program is a really rich resource for digging into student data thanks to the diagnostic information that it gives us. So we're able to pull out of that information that the main through year really we struggle to get information out of, such as where are kids instructionally ready to learn next? Where are they on their learning pathway? What are specific learning standards teachers can engage students in, whether it's individual, small group, or whole group? So those investments in programs like iReady have provided us a way to look at student data to make really strong decisions about curriculum and instruction, and will continue to do so in the coming years. The position of the K-12 SEL specialist, I've been incredibly thankful for this year because there is a lot of curriculum work to do. And that person, Stacey Canapa, has really ensured the success of the SEL curriculums by digging in deeply in the implementation of the programs that were adopted fully at the end of last year for this year. So Mind Up K2 is in its first year of implementation with staff and students. and rulers in its first year of implementation, which means they're working on teacher SEL. And the second year of implementation, 3 to 8 next year, will be on student SEL. And that work has been largely successful due to her ability to get into all of the buildings and the teams that work on the planning to support them. And in addition to that, alongside iReady, another well invested in program that allows us to make really smart decisions about the SEL curriculum or the skills that we want to focus on and work on in staff development includes our panorama survey data. So the investment in that allows us to ensure that we're really seeing from year to year accurate information from our students about what their needs are in their social emotional learning. And then one thing that I focused on this year is really starting to dig deeper into curriculum reviews and beginning to articulate vertical reviews of our programs that are on a consistent and predictable timeline. So this year we began with social studies and with health and physical education. And a lot of the time when you hear about a curriculum review, you're thinking, okay, we're going to look at the standards that we're using and we're going to determine whether or not the program, the textbook, or the instructional materials that we're using fit our needs. And that is one piece of it. But the other pieces include, are we programming throughout the day in a way that meets best practice? For example, 45 minutes daily of social studies is the National Social Studies recommendations. So are we doing that K-12 would be a question. The other thing that it includes is ensuring that we're up to date on best practice. So those vertical teams are engaging in looking at articles in their content area and determining whether or not there's adequate professional development for them or opportunities to engage in professional development that allow them to raise their skills with best practices. So we've begun that with social studies and health and PE, and then next year we'll begin that process with English language arts and world languages. It doesn't mean social studies and health PE have ended. It simply means they'll move into the second year of what I'm setting for the 5-year curriculum review cycle. So in the second year, we'll dig a little more into the standards and do individual phase level work around professional development and standard growth. And then I pulled this right from last year because I think that this really succinctly sums up the biggest challenge we face in curriculum, which is enough time. Our obligation and our focus is always on the students, their instruction, their needs, and the student outcomes, what we can do to improve those. But along with that comes a real need for teachers to have time to engage in the professional development that allows them to successfully provide the instruction that can do that. And that doesn't just mean around the curriculum, but having time in grade level teams to meet and plan instruction. It means digging into the standards. It means digging into core instructional materials. It means determining where supplementation is needed and finding that, training in that, providing that. I could go on and on. And then on top of that, if I had time, I'm going to try to keep this really short, but on top of that too, I think there's a real obligation to consider what are the needs across the available curriculums as students' needs change, right? So how does the general ed curriculum support and complement with the special services curriculum, right? To ensure that in the continuum of services, students are having all of their needs met. Making sure that all of the components of the curriculum in the general ed setting are ensuring that success happens. So finding the time to do all of those components is a huge challenge. But this budget will allow us to continue to provide those high quality instructional materials and trainings that Scarborough is known for and has invested in already. It will allow us to continue to support our social and emotional skill development, and thanks to Panorama, gauge the effectiveness of those supports and make adjustments as we continue to move forward. We'll continue to monitor the key progress areas of math and reading. And really science too, through state assessments, and then, math and reading and iReady. And then we're looking to continue to expand classroom data entry for data analytics. So using performance matters, can classroom teachers access all of the data points we have to sit and make instructional decisions based on the students in front of them, whether they're individual, small group, or whole group decisions. So those unmet needs continue to be that time for developing integrated units of study, time for developing curriculum, time for writing and revising curriculum, time for supplementing instruction that needs to be done. That's why.
Is it the time that everybody's just been waiting for anxiously to talk about technology?
On the
Yes.
edge of our, it's your time to shine.
Batting cleanup, right? Like I stand between everybody and the door.
Actually, central office stands.
Yeah. You get
You're not quite
that.
on.
Yeah, all right, but
Can
then
you
only 5
upgrade
minutes.
my bandwidth? That's the question. Yeah.
Okay, so the things that I think are super exciting probably are not like super exciting to everybody else, but I will try to make this as exciting as possible. Celebrating our successes, so impacts of prior investments. We did upgrade the bandwidth district-wide this year, which in and of itself, we don't pay for, but we did have to, so we were chosen by MSLN, which is the main
School and library network.
school and library network through Network Maine. We were chosen as one of the districts to have our bandwidth upgraded from 1 gig to 10 gig, which is huge because our overnight backups will be 4 gig. To do that, though, we did have to purchase some new switches for our demilitarized zone, or DMZ. Super exciting, I know. I'll throw out some more acronyms along the way too, just in case you were wondering. DMZ, right. So that was very exciting because it did help us. You can imagine, during COVID in particular, a lot of more things went online. So we found ourselves burning through bandwidth quickly, and this definitely is giving us a little more breathing room. I should preface all this too by saying, I think everybody here knows, but just in case, we are a shared services department. So I think we're the only shared services department in the town of Scarborough. So we work for both the town of Scarborough and the school district. Our staff is split between them, as is our network infrastructure. So a lot of the network backbone that we have, a lot of these back end infrastructure hardware pieces are shared between the town and school. So when you look at things like the CapEx budget, sometimes you'll see a core switch, and that will be split between the town and school because we do share that. And it creates a lot of cost efficiencies between staff and services and network and hardware and software, et cetera. And we replace end-of-life devices. So, I mean, that's exciting for the people who were struggling with old Chromebooks. You can imagine the beating that some of those Chromebooks took over COVID. And so we did have to replace quite a few of them. They were on their last gasp. We also replaced the projectors at the high school. Those were getting on towards 11 years old, I think. And it was getting almost impossible to find bulbs for the replacement parts. A lot of them were dying. So we managed to replace all of those. And as we replace these devices, the new ones offer a lot more efficiency in terms of, energy efficiency. A lot of times they'll offer, brighter lumens for the projectors. They offer more features and functionality. So like now the teachers can actually, and they're interactive. They can do something interactive on the whiteboard and save it and then print it out later, or save it and not print it. We like trees. We deployed external wireless capabilities throughout the district. So this was really in support of the emergency management system, but we did have to put up wireless access points externally. So that was quite a project that we did over the summer and then into the fall. That was at every single building, and we identified sort of the high density areas for where people were exiting the buildings, and then that's where we deployed the APs.
We had a fantastic second year for our high school student help desk. I was very excited about this program because, as you can imagine, having one field tech up at the high school who's trying to service 1,000 students and, 100+ staff, it was nearly impossible, particularly as we started to onboard more devices and we started to onboard more services. So we had the student help desk last year. We had about 5 kids. Of those 5 kids, 3 of them completed A+ certification. We have about 7 kids this year. So not in addition, some of those kids graduated and then we brought on some new kids. They are helping across the district now, actually. So they've gone out for Day of Code. They went into every building and helped out staff and students with Day of Code. They did a project for the high school guidance office where they actually built a check-in kiosk so students can check in and check out. They helped out at the town hall with the electric signage there, programming it and tying it to Google. So they've been involved. And usually we kind of let them pick the projects and then they, will spend a period of time working on them, but it's really saved our staff too. So much so that I'm really excited to announce that we are going to be starting a student help desk sort of feeder system at the middle school.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so that's in the works and that crew will also be able to help out the staff and students there. And then I would expect that they'll probably help out district wide as well. And it will create a feeder program for kids who want to then move on to the help desk at the high school. So I can't say enough about Ryan and Frank. Ryan is up at the high school, Ryan Marshall. Frank Hernandez is at the middle school. They've been working together to create sort of a cohesive program that will work hand in hand. And Ryan's done an amazing job with these kids. He's just created a really safe space for them to learn and get their certification and think about, maybe what they want to do with their life and technology. Hopefully they will all go into technology. Hopefully we haven't driven them away. I'm happy to say too that we won an MLTI/DOE/CISA/Homeland Security grant this year. We had, our firewalls were hitting end of life and they were really way too small for our district and town. So I wrote a number of grant requests this past summer and we did win one of them, which was over $100,000. So these firewalls will kind of right size us in terms of securing our perimeter. And they also give us a lot of features and functionality for remote services, like remote capability in terms of locking things down and, controlling access. And then we have some security enhancements. So I never go too deep into that. If anybody has questions about it, we can definitely chat afterwards. Y'all heard my security presentation, so I think you have a good idea of why we need some of these enhancements. But we did roll out some hard tokens, which are the UB keys. So we rolled those out to folks who have access privileged information. And we have some backend infrastructure equipment. So some systems that are helping to secure our email systems, and then some other very complex things that I won't get into, but they were needed. We still have some outstanding needs, so we will, our CapEx budget over the next 5 years kind of builds that out. In terms of facing challenges, cybersecurity threat landscape still number 1 at the top of the list. Again, y'all heard the cybersecurity presentation, so you're aware of the things like phishing, social engineering, vishing, smishing, ransomware, supply chain attacks. I mean, you name it, it's not getting better, and it's certainly not going down in volume. It's going up in volume. I think I told you guys maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we got a couple of phishing attempts, a week, and now we get hundreds of them a day. So a lot of this falls to automated systems to try to, buffer our environment. And also training our staff. I'm finding that sending folks to conferences and webinars and, as much online and in-person training as we can get about the threats that are facing us. It's always good to stay, on top of that. And we're seeing, it's like AI, is it friend or foe? And it's both really, but we have to know when it's a friend and know when it's a foe. And that's something that only really kind of staying on top of everything on a day-to-day basis, will accomplish. We do have aging infrastructure and, everybody here has talked about the aging infrastructure in the K2s. For us, we have held off on replacing all of our switches, our racks, our cabling. Other systems, we have some uninterrupted power sources, some UPSs out there. We've held off on replacing them. We're gonna have to replace it. They're actually, they're rusting now. And we're gonna start losing connectivity if we don't replace them. So we're probably, Kate and I put something in the 5-year CapEx. We're probably in the next couple of years looking at about 150,000 to replace that equipment. At some point, we have to look at the cabling, because when we went out, to say it was 13 years ago that we replaced the telecom system townwide. And when we did that in the K2s in particular, because the buildings are so old, the conduits are packed full of cable. And the company that we had come in and install the telecom system obviously didn't want to start pulling the cable out because we don't really know what it's connected to on the other end. So in some cases, if you go into some of the K2s, you'll see that the cables actually, we had to run it down the wall with molding, the cable molding. At some point, if we are gonna stay in those buildings, we're gonna have to basically gut the cable and redo it, because there's Cat 3, there's, copper wire, POTS lines, there's all kinds of stuff in there. We gotta haul it out and redo it. We do have a number of big pieces on the back end. There are 2 more core switches. We're swapping out one of the core switches this year. We have 2 more that we're gonna have to swap out over the next couple of years. I put this on there because I'm finding, and I think Katie's finding, because it's really kind of false to us, to vet these vendor applications. And, as I mentioned before, with COVID and the rise of online applications and online services, I mean, there's been so many startups and so many legacy vendors that are offering new things. In the past, we have a tech request form that folks who want a new service or, excuse me, even hardware, fill out this tech request form, asks a series of questions, kind of takes them through everything from what's the intent, what's the purpose, to funding. And then they turn that in, and then Katie takes a look at it for curriculum assessment. And then I'll take a look at it for, a review of privacy policy, cybersecurity policies, terms of service, indemnification, warranties, liabilities, all that kind of stuff. Where at most in years past, I might have 8, like that was a lot. I think we're getting on towards 48 or 50 in the hopper now, requests from people. So it takes a lot of time. If you can imagine, if we were to go out and look at, a website and you click on that terms of service button, it's pages and pages and pages. And you click on the privacy policy, it's pages and pages and pages. And then half time it links out someplace else. We're finding more and more that these vendors are placing the liability back on the school districts. So we are trying to be very careful about our risk exposure there. And it's becoming onerous and difficult. So at some point, we're spending hours and hours and hours of our time. Is this, what I do at like 9 o'clock at night? I might as well look at another one. You open up the laptop. I think we're gonna have to try to figure out a way to streamline that, offload it, something. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, Katie, but it's definitely become a big piece of the pie. And then staffing definitely is a challenge, and that I will talk about in a minute because that really has to do with our end user to staff ratio. So this budget will allow us to replace end of life technology. We're always on that sort of, hamster wheel of trying to replace things that are about to die, make sure other things that are close to dying don't die, make sure all the trains stay running on time. So we do have, like, as I mentioned, a number of back end infrastructure that needs to be replaced, the biggest of which is a core system. Like Wentworth, I think it's here. that will be replacing. That one services both the town and school, so we'll be splitting that cost. We do have to upgrade the infrastructure, so, you know, at some point, we're probably gonna have to go back to the K2s, but we have looked at sort of starting that process this year, just so we can kind of spread the costs out. We also next year are gonna replace the Wentworth Chromebooks because those are, usually we work on a 5-year cycle, so after 4 years, we'll replace the Chromebooks in one of the base levels. This time we pushed it pretty far, so now they're in their 6th year, and we're seeing a lot of failures. Those Chromebooks went home over COVID. We still allow the students here to take them home, so they have taken a beating, and we have a lot of like chassis that have cracked and things that need to be replaced. So we'll be replacing those this year. The good news is the MLTI program, so the Maine Learning Technology Initiative program, started out servicing 7th and 8th grades within Maine. Over time and through pressure from various organizations in Maine, they have started this year. We choose the grade level that we want to replace, you know, wholesale replace. So it's not a multi-grade level, but we were able this year to choose 3rd grade here. So the district is actually, we've put in for that reimbursement. So the district's only having to pay for the 4th and 5th grade here. So we'll be replacing all of that. We are going to be replacing all the student printers. Those printers, I think I installed those like one of the first years are like 13 years. I think they're 13 years. They're starting to fail too.
2012, 2013.
Yeah. So they're starting to fail. And again, they're so old that we just can't get parts for them. We can't get, the ink is ridiculously expensive. The drums are failing. It's a problem. So we're gonna replace all of those. They're fairly inexpensive printers, but there's like 40 of them. We are gonna replace, we've been trying to replace the multifunctional printers in a synchronous format. So I think that will be year 3 for us. We have about 8 of them that we need to replace. Those are the big printers that do printing and copying, and people can send jobs and release them, so you can do confidential printing and things on them. I think once we replace that, we'll have maybe one more cycle left.
I think what we'll end up with is we'll be bridging over from FY24 money we currently have in FY25, and we should be able to get it done.
Yeah. Okay.
That's in operating, those dollars.
So if you remember in the Wayback Machine, that everybody used to have desktop printers on their desks. So that's when we did away with that, because the amount of money that we were spending in ink and everything else was crazy. And that's when we went to centralized print. So when we went to centralized print, we had MFPs, the multifunctional printers, and then it all goes through central print servers. So we also have something called FM audit, and we can track the amount of printing and which machines are maybe hitting end of life and, you know, are being overused. And then expand cybersecurity capabilities. So we're going to expand the deployment and use of hard tokens to basically the whole staff. So that'll be this year. There's a couple of more back-end cybersecurity things that we're doing, but again, I won't bore everybody to death with that. So our unmet needs, and like I said, one of our biggest challenges is really staffing. We have 11 people, and those 11 people service, you know, 3,800 students, staff, townwide, 18 locations, 16 miles of fiber. We have 16,000 devices that we have to maintain and manage, inventory, you know, asset control. It's a big job. Plus we do all of the back end application management for things like Munis, and the peripherals. We maintain all of the infrastructure in every single building. So all the servers, the switches, the routers, the cables, the telecom system. We do significant project management for different large software applications that folks are looking at. The latest one that we did was for the public safety department. They're overhauling their entire core system. So we did the project management, meaning we did requirements definition, vendor vetting, we did vendor matching. I negotiated the contract. We went out with it. So between 11 people, and then we have one person at each phase level who just services those folks in that phase level. And for K2s, we have somebody who actually travels between them. So we're running our staff ragged, not gonna lie, they're a fantastic group of people. I couldn't have asked for better folks. They have been with us for a long time. I mean, since I've been here, we really haven't had any, since I've been here the last time. We haven't really seen any turnover, so they do jump in and help each other out whenever it's needed. They'll help out school, town side, whatever you need, but they are on call 24/7, 365. And if there's a server room fire like we had, or there is, I get security alerts all night, basically, of this machine's, out of date in terms of, antivirus protection, whatever. If something happens, we're on call, we're driving in. So it's a lot to put on 11 people. And I think at some point, we're gonna be looking towards having maybe an application specialist. Because we are increasing the number of applications and services that we provide. And we are the administrators for it, but we really just keep relying on existing staff to do the configuration, set up people for authentication, set up all the parameters and rules and then maintain and manage that and the integrations and everything. So it's getting beyond the scope of the staff that we have now. So we aren't asking for that this year. We have managed to hold off, I think, by creating the help desks, we have managed to kind of hold that additional staff ask at bay, but it's tough. And there are things that we're not doing, like we should be providing more security training, and we just don't have the staff or the time to do it. So I think that's it, right? Did I stay in my 10 minutes? Close. All right.
Any of us have stayed in our 10 minutes.
No one's counting tonight,
Yeah.
sorry. That ship sailed long ago. So who's still awake, wants to do central office? We're looking at Jeff. Jeff's like, Jeff's playing Tetris down there.
Yeah. His bag is all this stuff.
You can do this one and then I'll do the next one.
All right. Let's do an advanced slide here. Oh, we're running. Look at that. I mean, I just can't say enough about our central office, and some of the unique ways that, we've created some positions just in the last year, to really support, in the areas of HR, in the areas of just payroll and how we operate and support, staff and families. So, we just have, new employees that have just jumped right in and added to the culture, shifted, I mean, Cheryl's just been amazing jumping in and feeling some very big shoes. So I feel like the, support that I get, that Diane receives, that all of our leadership, team gets at central office has just been, without peer, really, and it's been great. And so, it's been a steep learning curve for some, but I just feel like we're in a space right now that's significantly stronger than last year and the year before.
Sure. I think if I had to say one thing about the team is that they're all ready to do whatever.
Yeah.
And there's no like, oh, that's not my job. It's like, oh, well, what are you doing? Can I help you? It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and just a very
Really
talented
great
skill set
culture.
out of the classroom, out of, school-based positions. And just very knowledgeable and in terms of curriculum and beyond just, some of the things that I think we even originally intended, to be done.
Yeah, and I think because we have been able to be fully staffed this year, we've been able to cross-train people on multiple programs. And so I think that was probably something that was not one of our strongest points prior to this year. And so if, you know, a certain person was out, then it was like, oh, you know, well, that was the
Too bad
person who
for
knew
you.
how to do that. And so, we have had the ability to cross-train, multiple people on programs. And, you know, as, you know, Kate and Jeff have both mentioned, we have folks who are, embracing that idea, right? And not being like, well, that's not my work, so I'm not gonna learn how to do that, right? I think, we're very fortunate with the folks that we have.
Do we have any challenges?
Yes.
Oh, look, staff shortages. How odd. But this is really about the whole district. So we're just talking about all of our friends and everybody that you've heard about already. And you've also heard about the contracts that are being negotiated. And, you know, from the district perspective at central office, that's huge for us because we see folks, you know, coming in looking for work, not coming in, not looking for work. And, you know, those open positions, are stressing everybody out, and it would be great to be able to have another tool in the tool belt for them.
Well, and last year was hard because not only were there a lot of a lot of our districts in and around where we are in a negotiating year and really, you know, again, facing staffing shortages that we're all facing, made some pretty significant increases in their salary negotiations. A couple even out of cycle, open their contract up to pass and negotiate some increases. So we're in a position, I think, this year to, you know, we're needing to play catch up and market adjust.
Make up some ground. So this is a really small print slide. Basically what we're looking at here is the fact that central office supports the entire district, and our priorities are the K-12 priorities of the full leadership team. So if you look at these bullets, we're basically talking about all of the needs and requests that you've heard from folks here this evening, and you'll hear more from the building leaders tomorrow. We're maintaining necessary current programs and services. That's our level services budget. That's our ground level. And then the social emotional learning curricula, you've heard about that. That's super successful and heading into a third year of thinking about that and making those investments. Mandated services, compliance. We heard lots about those things from Chris and for all kids as well, not just special services, but everywhere across the spectrum of our students. Targeted class sizes, there's a little chart in the budget book that talks about what our aims are for class sizes and trying to meet those. And so we've made two adjustments this year. One, reducing a teacher at middle school so that they're more in line with what their class size targets are, and adding a position at Wentworth School because they have a very large fifth grade class. So again, to point out that we're always looking at what those individual student needs are and making adjustments, whether they be adding or subtracting.
Yeah, I would say this is a pretty lean year, you know, as Kate had mentioned earlier on. I mean, not even 1% really of this represents kind of what you would designate as like even remotely discretionary in terms of meeting student needs. The bulk of the new requests and programs are really mandated by, you know, a challenging group of incoming kindergartners. So, you know, and I think if you take into account, you know, making the adjustment at the middle school to actually reduce a couple of classroom positions, you know, in order to facilitate that. And the leadership team really tried, again, going back to the K-12 approach of finding ways to minimize that increase.
Other themes on here, you've also heard about early intervention for K kids, academic support, SEL support, learning readiness, executive functioning, all of this super student focused, super based on some foundational data that we've been able to pull, as Katie made reference to see where our kids have needs, where they might be in need of some extra support. We've got the adaptive communication for inclusion, which Chris spoke to. We've got enrichment, which is a small but important incremental change. The learning commons, I think, is interesting. I think we first started advocating for an extra K-5 librarian. So right now our librarian serves 3 primary schools and one person, which is kind of an interesting job. We've been thinking about and talking about and proposing splitting that up. So you have one person who does K2 and the other person does 3-5 in this beautiful space for 5 years, maybe 6, certainly pre-COVID.
And in the meantime, we've gone through
3
librarians because it's an untenable position.
It's not really a sustainable job. So we've got a fantastic K-5 librarian right now. We'd like to hang on to her. And we'd like to be able to actually develop the learning commons at the K2 schools to their full potential. Because they're really, I mean, not that they're underused, but there's so much potential there that isn't tapped. And the last bullet is, guess what? The building project, whatever that looks like today, whatever it'll look like tomorrow. We need to keep that on our list and we need to keep moving forward to figure out what that solution for K8 looks like. You have any more slides?
I don't know, I think those are the questions. Maybe not.
Questions? Oh, yeah, questions, Q&A, all right. So we're at curriculum, improvement of instruction, and instructional technology and central office. And everybody's full of questions.
Just 2. Just out of curiosity, how much do you think having that, you alluded to it, how much do you think, having your high school support desk has saved you?
I think it has pushed off for at least 2 years now, having to look at hiring another field tech.
Yeah.
And maybe forever,
Yeah.
right? If we can beef that up and we can get some more help with the middle school. I think they did do a tremendous amount of work in the beginning of the year when we're deploying devices. And everybody's fresh coming back to school and every single person has forgotten how to use technology. So they go into the classrooms and they, they're pretty much on call and they provided a tremendous workforce for us. And hopefully they got something out of it too.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Great skills.
So that's at least saved the field tech salary for 2 years. Yeah, for sure.
And then, Kate, you may need to, you may not know this one off the top of your head.
I'm ready to write it down.
Okay. Do you know the number of open positions you have in total and versus, in total, what's open? And then how many positions have you been able to fill? Like, Chris was talking about, outsourcing, I think,
Yeah, we can get that. I mean, the outsourcing is in pockets.
Yeah.
There's a few, the ed tech positions that Chris mentioned. There's cataract cleaning that's doing some cleaning for us.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think
Just curious.
that would be easy enough to get the pieces together. The FTE change is a moving target, right?
It moves every day.
Yeah.
I know in our world, I often say it's harder to count people than money.
Oh,
So,
always.
Yep,
The money doesn't run around.
it doesn't. All right, that was all I have.
I do have a question, Jen. What is the industry average for the ratio of
Glad
text?
you asked. The industry average is about 1, and this is in a complex environment, which we certainly have. It's about 1 staff person, help desk person for 45 end users. And we currently have 1 to 350.
So you know what my next question is? what is the impact of, other than, I know that the team has done so much, the burnout factor is absolutely there. But what does it mean to not have enough coverage in place?
It means people wait, right? So, which definitely can then impact learning, can impact teaching. I mean, if you have a broken Chromebook and we can't get to it for 3 days, you have a student. Now, we do have hot swap spares that we can swap out. There have been times when there's testing, kids forget their Chromebooks, and or we have something else happening where the hot swap spares are gone. And, you know, then we've got an issue. We try to never let that happen, but, you know, the resources are limited, so. So there's that, you know, I've asked everybody, we talk about district emergency management. You know, I've asked everybody to think about, and I want to have a roundtable session on this. What if the network went down? What would you do? Because you have no Google Classroom, you have no Power School, you have no Clever, you have no Gmail, you have nothing. So how, you know, it's a little mind blowing to think about, I think, at this point, particularly, you know, post-COVID. People are so used to being online, but you know, it's that kind of same thing. What would you do without technology? Everything sort of revolves around it.
Yeah, and is there a contingency plan in place if that were to happen? Like, what does that look like? We send them home or they don't come in?
Storm packs.
Yeah, is it storm day? Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it's
that's a valid point.
pencil, right? And we do have, you know, disaster recovery, business continuity plans in place. But, you know, there's always that potential, you know, we talked about that during my security presentation. If you had a ransomware attack and you took everything down for however long. Yeah.
And some of those have lasted for weeks, those cyber attacks.
Yeah.
Cursive lesson plans.
The last one,
Cursive writing lessons.
when you're looking at those, like the privacy pieces, and you come across a vendor who is maybe modified, and then now the pushback is to us. How does that work with you and Katie if it's a long-term curriculum vendor who has now changed their whole policy? How do we handle that?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, Katie and I have been saying no. No, we're not gonna use, I mean, I feel beyond the risk exposure for the district. You know, we keep talking here about how it's all about the kids, and really it's about the kids, and I feel like we personally, you know, need to be responsible for data stewardship, right, of the kids and staff. So I feel like we're sort of the first line of defense in terms of, you know, reviewing those terms of service and the privacy policies and everything else. So we will say no, and it's not a super popular opinion. But it is what it is, right?
It's such a huge responsibility. I mean, you're
Yeah.
basically, you know, the
Yeah.
gateway or the gatekeeper for safety.
Right. Well, 5 years ago, when I was doing this here, the language in these terms of service and privacy policies were completely different. And now I think so many of them have gotten themselves into trouble between FERPA, COPA, you know, PPRC, I mean, SIPA, you name it. That they basically state somewhere in the multitudes of languages, you're probably used to reading lots and lots of contracts, right? If you dig through there, you pull out, you know, and by the way, the total liability that the vendor takes on is equal to $50. Well, $50 isn't even gonna pay a fraction of an hour with an attorney, so, you know, it's not, so we're careful about that, and if it's something, I've had situations on the town side where negotiating contracts, we'll push back and say, nope, you know, your warranties, your limitations of liability, your indemnification, this language all has to change. And we'll state what we want. And it's surprising. I mean, they oftentimes will come back and negotiate. And sometimes they go, nope. And then we go, okay, it was nice knowing you.
And to answer it from a curriculum perspective, one of the questions we always ask is, what is the learning need before the technology need? And can we address that learning need with existing programs that have already been vetted and are known to be safe? And if they can, we try to redirect the staff to that and connect them with their technology integration coach to ensure they have the professional development they need to fully utilize the programs already in place. So that is a big part of what we do there. And we did a book study with the coaches this year called Learning First, Technology Second, to really reinforce that our goal first curriculum is to address learning needs. And then we can consider how technology can help us do that. And so saying no is easier when you know that we've got a host of programs we do across. And can we be creative about how we apply this?
And the tech coaches receive the same cybersecurity presentation that you guys saw, so they have a much
And
better
they're
understanding. Yeah,
At the learning questions.
Yeah.
right? Like digging into those with teachers.
yeah, I think they're very cognizant of
Mhm.
the potential risk, potential liability. We're not the only district facing this, by the way. I mean, I can tell you it's become a very hot topic at tech director. We have a main educational tech director institution, and it's become a very hot topic with everybody. Because we're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place, right? We do have the Student Data Privacy Consortium. And there is one for Maine, MESPA, which we push, try to push the privacy policy piece through. But that doesn't necessarily help with the terms of service. And oftentimes if you read both, sort of hand in hand with each other, one will conflict with the other. So we just have to be very careful. It takes us a long time.
Other questions?
I have a turf question, but should I save that for tomorrow at the high school? Because I didn't ask when it was facilities time. Or,
Why don't you ask it and then we'll see whether it needs to wait, how's that?
and everybody's size level.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm trying to understand the, process by which we had I'm gonna call it an estimate. Maybe that's the best word, from Woodard and Curran last year.
So Woodard and Curran is kind of like Harriman, they
Yeah,
give
the
you an
intermediate.
idea of what things cost.
Right,
The
so I don't know if
designer.
estimate is the right word, but we had a ballpark figure as to what they thought
With
the
the
project
budget.
would cost.
Yeah.
And we were all very excited because it fell within what we had already asked for. And then this year,
It doesn't,
it does not.
right?
So is there no obligation on Woodard and Curran's part because they're the intermediary to honor that pricing?
Woodard and Curran aren't the people that we're gonna pay
Right.
to do the work. So they can't guarantee someone else's pricing.
Right, so even last
They
year,
were making an estimate, just the way I would make an estimate to say, I think this software is gonna cost this, and here's my best guess as to what it's gonna be like based on market. you know,
right, and there's
market
no,
information.
the contractors that Woodard or Curran would go to have no obligation to honor that either. Is
They
that
never
correct?
made us a quote. The actual vendors last year said, we can't do the project in your timeline. The two people that we wanted to work with said, we're not even gonna write you a proposal because we can't do the work. And so now we're a year later and they're saying, yeah, we can do the work, we'll write you a proposal and it's more than what you expected.
Yeah.
But we're now like, what, 4 years out from the original process when we're Curtis putting those numbers together. So even though they updated the estimate last year, they're still not in control of market forces and they're not in control of that pricing. We're just kind of trying to write us a budget that we can do something with.
You're talking the truth.
The track part of the project.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we've got right now is we're very close to, I keep saying that, like you're all gonna be like, wow. Having a final proposal, Geosurfaces, I think is gonna be the one that comes the closest to our number. And they actually went out to look to another subcontractor to do the site work because they weren't getting the numbers they wanted. They really want the work, I think. And they're doing their best to get to our number, but it's still about $500,000 more than what we have in the bank. So that's where the problem lies, right? So we've either got to sort of value engineer it down even further, or we have to, have a little bit more money. And at the moment, there's a placeholder in the capital budget to finish the job. So by the time we get to second reading, though, we'll know what that real number is.
And is is that, where am I? Is the track, I want to point in the right direction, is the track, where it's located, is that in any at all consideration? I don't know what the new, school.
The building project thing.
Project, thank you, I'm done,
Um,
okay. I can't say words, but is that a
Well,
possibility of where it
that's
might
why
go?
that's why
No, we
we deferred
delayed
the
it.
project the first time.
Yeah.
And did not complete it. If we're gonna have that conversation again, I'm probably just gonna say somebody else gets to do this because I'm done.
Well, I think that the last building committee, and hopefully that this current iteration would believe the same, but the amount of property you would have to take to get, it was, you would have to go all the way to the street, essentially, take the tennis courts, the grass, literally everything all the way down. And a tennis court is I'm gonna use the wrong words, so I'm looking at Diane, it's not a protected area, but it's an area that was funded by some grant money.
Yes.
And so we can't just pull those tennis courts out of the ground
Without paying.
without paying for it.
We would have to buy some property somewhere else.
Yeah, so
I mean,
I
the
don't
short answer
believe.
is it's not a viable solution, it never
Okay.
was.
Yeah.
It's
That's all
it
we
was
need to
the
know.
question of the consideration of that space that made us not wanna make that investment.
And
Right.
the other piece would be if we think along the lines of what you heard Sarah talking about earlier this evening. If we were to remove all of those fields from this campus, we would only be compounding the issue of transporting students to off-site fields
Yeah.
for practices and games.
Because everything could be offsite.
Yeah, I think
And I'm not
that's okay.
advocating that that's a solution, I was just curious. if
Wondering
it's
how that
still
plays
out there.
together.
Mhm.
No, it's a valid question because we had the same conversation. Why do we lay down the track that we can't pull back up, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the conversation will move into, do we tear this up? That we just paid for, because by the time that
Yeah.
committee gets to that phase of land, it'll be hopefully done.
I would,
Also advocate that we not wait around because that track is only getting worse.
Well,
Right.
and that, exactly.
We're not in liability
Well
there.
overdue, it's a
A
liability.
huge concern is liability.
And even if we do have a new building project, the building's not gonna happen for 4 or 5 more years, so.
Exactly.
You know, what about the kids in the meantime?
right.
Yeah, and the
No,
track.
I've definitely run that track and you gotta switch lanes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. Yep.
So there,
Nice
you
to
got a
them.
question?
And
All right.
there's our tomorrow.
Next up,
8:30 a.m.
tomorrow.
Really looking forward to seeing you.
So like
all.
12
See you in
hours.
12
We'll
hours.
see you soon.
Well, you know, we're only an hour and a half over time. I think that's pretty good. Do we have to,
You have to, are you gonna adjourn?
adjourn?
Oh, do I have unless there's any objection, we will adjourn the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, with no objections, the meeting is adjourned at 8:26.